You think you can just accuse me of cheating while I was away on business and demand a divorce? My husband, Jackson, bellowed through the phone. It should have been a jolting moment, but I knew better. This was just his attempt at stirring up drama. I already sold it. And you know what? I could practically feel his emotions quivering on the other end. Did he honestly believe I wouldn't see through his little charade? His naivety was almost comical. As his accusations continued to ricochet off my resolve, I found myself teetering between anger and amusement. Yet, amidst it all, a sense of empowerment began to emerge. This wasn't just a spat. This was a turning point. This was the moment I decided to take control. I chuckled inwardly at his feeble attempt to manipulate me. And then, as if the universe had aligned, a realization dawned on me. It was my turn to play. I'm Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. Though I've held a steady job at a college store since I graduated from junior college at 20, Jackson's career trajectory has been less than stable. He's 2 years older, but when we first met 3 years ago, he was bouncing between jobs or sometimes doing nothing at all. He proposed to me hastily, but I set a condition. He needed to secure a stable job. I wasn't about to embark on a marriage without considering our future. Okay, but there's a condition, I asserted firmly, watching Jackson's expression shift to one of concern. What is it? He asked cautiously. You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future. He attempted to brush it off with a casual remark. Oh, don't worry, you're working, so there's no rush, right? But my parents would be concerned if I married without a job. I'll find one before we tie the knot, he promised, sensing the seriousness in my tone. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job search journey. Eventually, he secured an office position at a construction company, and we moved forward with our plans to wed. At the time, I saw Jackson as somewhat careless with money and work, but I believed our partnership could balance each other out. I thought I could guide him towards financial responsibility, and he would complement my strengths. Little did I know, our challenges were just beginning. About a year into our marriage, as we were exploring the idea of buying a house, Jackson revealed a troubling obstacle. I might not qualify for a loan, he confessed casually. I was taken aback. What do you mean? I pressed for an explanation. He shrugged. Because I haven't been at my job long enough, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only option would be my dad, but he's dealing with some serious gambling debts. He probably wouldn't be able to help. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I was dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. But Jackson, appearing unfazed, nonchalantly remarked, If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can secure the loan. We'll both contribute to paying it off. It's just a formality. That's beside the point. Why didn't you bring this up before? This is significant for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Though he offered an apology, his contrition felt superficial, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to protest further, faced with the already arranged contract and the presence of the agent, I decided against escalating the situation. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement, for the loan application, and impulsively finalized the purchase under my name. Doubt not at me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply asserted, then we won't proceed, instead of hastily preparing the paperwork. My anxiety heightened with the looming issue of my in-laws. The other day, I had a conversation with Dad, Jackson began. He mentioned he might lose the house due to the debt I mentioned earlier, so he's considering moving in with us. Is that all right? What? Why would you even entertain that idea? I reacted swiftly, but Jackson merely shrugged it off. Well, he's facing difficulties. My brother is single, but he's working abroad. I'm the only one Dad can turn to. Shouldn't we seriously discuss this? Maybe he can stay temporarily until he finds a place, but committing to living with us permanently is a major decision. Jackson scowled. You just don't want him to stay, do you? If he moves in, we can divide the living expenses. You're always going on about money. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't given your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I exclaimed, frustration evident in my tone. But Jackson simply muttered, I hate discussing money, before storming out of the room. Such disputes became a regular occurrence. Every time, Jackson would brush off my concerns and eventually retreat. No resolution was ever reached. However, Jackson wasn't entirely inactive regarding his family's predicament. As part of his role in construction site administration, he frequently dealt with real estate contracts. He often consulted a specific agency on how to secure the best price for selling his family's home and the necessary procedures involved. I overheard these discussions repeatedly, finding solace in the fact that I wasn't alone in contemplating this matter. Yet the prospect of my in-laws moving in with us post-sale, as if it were a foregone conclusion, continued to unsettle me. Jackson began attending meetings with real estate agents and my in-laws without involving me, and he started spending more weekends away from home. Eventually, he embarked on a lengthy business trip lasting several months, necessitated by the distance of the construction site he was overseeing. It wasn't apparent to me then, but the seeds of our power struggle had already been sown. A few days after Jackson departed for his trip, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping excursion. Hello, the man who greeted me seemed familiar. Memories flooded back, recalling him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, a young employee named Samuel, according to Jackson. Samuel had been with the company for less than a year. Ah, yes, I remember you. You visited our house before, right? Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even joining for a meal. My apologies. No need to worry. I should have been more welcoming. We ended up sharing tea together. Samuel was affable and appeared more level-headed than Jackson, despite his youth. As we conversed over tea, we found common ground and eventually bid each other farewell. At that moment, I couldn't fathom that this brief encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. Yet that's precisely what happened when Jackson confronted me. You've been cheating on me while I was away, haven't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave, immediately. Jackson's accusation hit me like a sledgehammer. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if the rumors were true. Jackson had evidently been spreading falsehoods, fabricating a narrative of my infidelity to justify his desire for divorce. And the bearer of this false tale was none other than Samuel, the man Jackson unjustly accused me of having an affair with. He showed up at my doorstep the day after our tea. I apologize for the sudden visit yesterday. Jackson asked me to reach out to you, Samuel confessed as he stood at my doorway. Shock and confusion washed over me, but I invited him inside, eager to hear his story. What he revealed left me stunned. Jackson had orchestrated a plan to frame me for infidelity, all in a bid to secure a divorce. Samuel was roped into fabricating evidence to support this scheme. There were two motives driving Jackson's deceitful agenda. Firstly, he coveted our house, fearing the potential loss of his parents-in-law's property. Jackson saw cohabiting with his parents as the easiest solution, but my resistance to the idea led him to devise a plan to oust me and claim the property. Secondly, Jackson was involved in an affair of his own, spending weekends with his mistress while pretending to discuss matters with my parents-in-law. His infatuation with her led him to view me, his wife, as an impediment. By framing me for infidelity, he hoped to secure both the house and compensation in the divorce settlement. Despite my perception of Jackson's lack of astuteness, his cunning nature in orchestrating such a devious plan was truly despicable. As I muttered my disdain, Samuel offered his apologies. However, I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his malicious scheme. I feigned cooperation, all the while plotting to turn the tables on him. Samuel, leveraging his expertise in real estate, offered various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a daring move. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. And so, when Jackson returned, bewildered by the news of the sale, I delivered the final blow. I know everything, Jackson. Samuel recorded everything, including your attempt to frame me for cheating with him. If we proceed with divorce, I can claim alimony and take you to court, I declared, relishing the shock that registered on Jackson's face. Why? Why? He stammered. But I wasn't finished. I had one last card to play. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just any new employee. He's the son of the company's CEO. I emphasized, incredulous at Jackson's obliviousness. Didn't you notice Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How did that escape your notice? I pressed, my frustration mounting. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly uncommon, Jackson attempted to rationalize. Are you serious right now? I couldn't believe his lack of awareness. Yes, I'm serious, Jackson replied, his shock palpable. The realization dawned on him slowly. Samuel's company was one of Jackson's most crucial clients, and they had played a significant role in handling his family's property matters. If news of this deceit reached the CEO, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in hot water. In fact, Samuel had likely already reported the situation. Look, fine, I'll check it out. But if you're lying, I'll figure it out. Jackson relented before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of his actions. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family property. With my house sold, Jackson had no option but to return to his family home following his business trip. Fortunately, Samuel had assisted me in finding an affordable apartment, so I encountered no difficulties. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Jackson persisted in reaching out to me. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he pleaded. It's too late for apologies now. You tried to manipulate me using someone else. Why should I believe anything you say? I countered. Don't say that. After our divorce, you can be with that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? He suggested, attempting to deflect blame. Yeah, she had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a sorry tale. But just because of that, don't expect me to change my mind and come running back to you. I muttered as I ended the call with a heavy sigh. Despite not disclosing my current address to him in hopes of keeping him at bay, Jackson's incessant calls persisted. Each time he pleaded, please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll be a better husband. Yet I was weary of his hollow promises. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and sever ties completely. To make matters worse, even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, please, Olivia, we'll be lost without you. It's not me you wanted, it's the house, right? But there's no house left, I reminded her. It wasn't just about the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand, she implored. You wanted the money, didn't you? I shot back, frustration seeping into my voice. That's not true. You're being unfair. You attempted to coerce me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson resorted to deceit to gain leverage in the divorce. I can't trust someone who resorts to such tactics, I asserted firmly. It's obvious you're only interested in money. I continued to rebuff their pleas. Then my father-in-law called, his tone dripping with arrogance. Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to assist my wife a little? Are you seriously refusing? Isn't all of this a consequence of the debts you've accumulated? I countered, my resolve unwavering. In response, his voice on the phone grew so loud that it hurt my ears. You heartless woman. Abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll teach you a lesson, you wicked woman. With that, I ended the call, shaken but determined. Armed with the recorded audio, I sought counsel from my lawyer. As it transpired, my father-in-law's words constituted a threat. Armed with this evidence, I informed Jackson that I'd pursue legal action if he didn't agree to the divorce. In a panic, Jackson reluctantly consented to the divorce. Finally, I was free from the clutches of that outrageous family. After the divorce, Jackson's reputation at work suffered, leading to a loss of trust and diminished responsibilities. Additionally, the unresolved debt forced him to sell his family home at a steep discount. Now, he resides in a modest apartment with his parents, grappling with a reduced salary and the burden of supporting his family. To compound his challenges, he is obligated to pay me alimony. Learning about Jackson's struggles firsthand from Samuel, who remained a confidant, I discovered an opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous role at a clothing store. Samuel, now working in the HR department of a real estate company, recommended me for a position that required strong communication abilities. After careful consideration and discussions with Samuel, I accepted the offer and transitioned to the real estate company. Throughout this transition, Samuel and I maintained our close bond, which eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. After a year of dating, we tied the knot, and I became the spouse of the future company president. Jackson likely never envisioned that the two individuals he attempted to falsely accuse of infidelity would ultimately find love and marry each other. Now surrounded by my supportive new family, including my in-laws, I look forward to building a beautiful life together with Samuel.
My name is Bella, and I'm 31 years old, and my sister Luna, who's 28, and I have always had a rocky relationship. It seems like we'll probably never see eye to eye. It baffles me why she seems to relish making my life difficult. Her latest antics, however, failed. Since our childhood, our parents have doted on her, which has always left me confused and a bit lost. Growing up, I was the sole focus of our parents' attention until Luna was born. Once she arrived, I felt pushed to the sidelines, a place I never quite managed to leave despite my best efforts. I really did try to win back their attention. I threw myself into sports and dancing, and even took part in school plays, excelling in singing and acting. But no matter what I achieved, it never seemed enough to divert their attention from Luna. In my eyes, Luna never had any standout talents that justified the immense attention she received. Perhaps one day I'll come to terms with how our parents treated us differently, but it's tough. Luna grew up overconfident and always needed to be the center of attention. She couldn't stand it if anyone else had a moment in the limelight. Every time I had good news to share, she somehow turned the situation around to focus on her, with our parents' full support. When I turned 20, the focus during my birthday party shifted abruptly when Luna, who had been drinking with friends, was the only one caught by the police after her friends managed to escape. You'd think my parents would be upset, but being the daughter of a police officer, she got off with just a light scolding from my dad and no real consequences, even though it completely ruined my celebration. The pattern continued when I landed my first job at 21. On what should have been a pivotal day for me, Luna stole the spotlight by announcing her engagement at only 19. My job achievement was overshadowed by celebrations of her engagement. That day, tensions boiled over, and I ended up having a major argument with Luna and my parents. They just couldn't see my point and labeled me as overly sensitive and dramatic. Since that day, I've cut off communication with my parents. They've tried reaching out over the years, but after nearly a decade, I haven't responded. It's clear they favor Luna much more than they do me. For her part, Luna hasn't made any attempts to reconcile either. Interestingly, she called off her engagement just a few weeks later. It seemed all she ever wanted was the attention. This long-standing family dynamic has left a deep rift between us, and I'm still figuring out how to navigate these complicated feelings of neglect and frustration. I'm relieved I've kept my distance from Luna. It's been beneficial for me. Despite our lack of communication for nearly a decade, we sometimes see each other at family gatherings. It's likely that through these brief encounters, both my parents and Luna are aware that I'm doing well. I now live in a lovely home and am constantly focused on bettering myself. I always make sure to dress well, choosing high-quality clothing. And while I don't have a family of my own and don't plan to start one soon, I've invested all my energy and resources into running my own business. This has been a dream of mine for a long time, and I'm thrilled about its progress. 3 years ago, when my business finally stabilized, I bought a new house and moved out of the apartment where I had spent many years. I explicitly told all my relatives to keep my new address confidential, especially Luna and my family. However, despite my precautions, Luna discovered where I lived. Just 7 days ago, I experienced something shocking. As I was about to leave for a party, I found the walls of my house vandalized with hateful messages spray-painted in bright red. The windows, too, were defaced with malicious graffiti. Standing there, trying to process the scene, I was utterly stunned. I contemplated calling the police, but then hesitated, suspecting that if Luna was responsible, nothing significant would be done about it. Given my father's position and past incidents, such as the negligible consequences she faced after my 23rd birthday party, I had little faith in achieving any justice. I even recognized Luna's handwriting and checked my security cameras to confirm my suspicions. Although she wore a hoodie, a brief glimpse of her face in the footage was all I needed to confirm it was indeed her. Calling the police seemed futile, knowing my father would likely intervene, and Luna would once again dodge any real consequences. This assumption wasn't just based on past personal experiences, it was also reinforced by various stories I've heard about her behavior from other relatives. This whole situation just reaffirmed my decision to maintain my distance and protect my peace, continuing to focus solely on my personal growth and achievements. It's not surprising that Luna leverages my father's connections to evade consequences. Her recent behavior stems from personal challenges. She launched a business a few years back, which unfortunately flopped spectacularly, leaving her saddled with debt. This debt wasn't just from the business, but also from obligations she carried over from her previous employment. Despite her irresponsible actions, our parents have been there to support her financially, leaving her with no need to fend for herself. Overwhelmed by her failures, she eventually resorted to alcohol and drugs. My father is well aware of Luna's dubious activities and consistently steps in to shield her from the fallout of her actions. Each time she lands in trouble, he's there to bail her out. It seems that my recent success, highlighted by my feature on the cover of a local magazine, has been difficult for Luna to accept. This coverage stirred discussions among our relatives, which probably felt like salt in her wounds, considering her lack of substantial achievements and her ongoing emotional instability. Driven by jealousy, she felt compelled to vandalize my house as a way to make a statement against the recognition I'd received. What I'm about to express may seem harsh, but much of Luna's plight is the result of her own choices. She has never been one to put in the effort or commit herself fully to any pursuit. She's grown accustomed to things simply working out for her, a mindset our parents have inadvertently encouraged. It's a natural progression to her current predicaments. When I reviewed the security footage and confirmed it was Luna, I knew involving the police would be futile. My father would protect her as always. Despite our 10-year estrangement, my father's instinct was to defend his troubled daughter, not me. After much contemplation, I decided to take a different approach. I shared the video on social media along with photos of the graffiti, which I believed Luna was responsible for. Although I couldn't take it to the police, I thought public opinion might at least shed some light on the situation. Within a few hours, the comments surged. I unblocked my family members so they too could see the posts. Luna, seeing the public reaction, messaged me, pleading to take down the post. Her outreach, after years of silence and in such a context, only highlighted the complexities and ongoing strife within our family dynamics. I firmly told Luna that I wouldn't remove the post. She has no right to dictate my actions, and if she thinks legal action is the way forward, then it's up to her to prove that she isn't the person caught on video. Should it come to that, we could end up in court. Our conversation didn't lead to any resolution, but realistically, she stands to lose more from this ordeal. While the damage to my house was an inconvenience and did require repainting, the financial burden of this was not a significant issue for me. Conversely, if Luna decides to take this matter to court, I have the resources to handle the associated costs. Luna must prove that she isn't the one in the video if she wants me to consider removing the post. However, that's an impossible task for her because it's clear that she is indeed the person captured in the footage. This realization put her in a precarious position, not just with me, but also with my father and others who have been backing her. She probably assumed that, like always, if I went to the police, my father would just make it all go away. But she misunderstood the dynamics of our situation. This time, she targeted the wrong person. After I communicated my stance, Luna didn't respond for several days. Meanwhile, the post stayed up, visible to friends, family, and even extended acquaintances. A couple of days ago, she reached out again, this time offering to cover the repainting costs and requesting a call to discuss the matter further. She urged me to delete the post, but since this wasn't about money, I dismissed her financial proposal. Instead, I insisted that she publicly acknowledge her actions and apologize. Luna then began to plead, willing to apologize privately in any form I preferred, but she refused a public apology. She argued that admitting her actions publicly would force her to take responsibility, potentially alienating the few clients she still had. It's unclear who these clients might be, considering she isn't leading any business endeavors currently. Whenever confronted about her business activities, she denies all allegations. Accepting responsibility with a public apology, she feared, would only further damage her already tenuous reputation. Despite her pleas, I remained firm. A genuine acknowledgement of her actions was crucial, not just for my peace, but as a step toward correcting the disruptions she caused in my life and potentially rebuilding trust, something that a private apology alone wouldn't satisfy. However, I remained indifferent to her appeals. I clearly stated my conditions. She could either address the situation publicly or let the post remain. To me, the choice was straightforward. After I refused to negotiate, Luna continued to send messages trying to sway me, but I felt no inclination to respond. A few hours later, my father intervened by calling me. He expressed his concern that my social media post was severely harming Luna, not just personally, but also professionally. He emphasized how important her career was to her and how she couldn't afford such disruptions. Once again, I was pressured to take down the post, but I stood my ground, which only added to her predicament. Had Luna not treated me poorly from the start, I wouldn't have felt the need to expose her actions. Despite the risk to her reputation, my parents did not push her to make a public apology. Instead, they chastised me over the phone, accusing me of being arrogant and thinking I could act without facing consequences. As our conversation was about to end, my mother, in tears, expressed her disappointment. She lamented that she never expected such behavior from me. She acknowledged that Luna and I had been treated differently since we were children, but criticized me for not responding to their attempts to reconnect over the last 10 years. She argued that it was unfair for them to be painted as villains now. They insisted they had changed significantly over the years. By refusing to delete the post, I had inadvertently tarnished my father's reputation as well, escalating the tension and discord within our family. This situation revealed deeper family rifts, highlighting unresolved issues and the complex dynamics of change and accountability. In my decision to maintain the post, I hadn't given my father the opportunity to demonstrate any real changes in his behavior or their parenting approach. The ongoing fallout from this choice continued to strain our familial relationships, making it clear that resolving these issues would require more than just a simple deletion of a social media post. I find myself in a complex emotional state over this whole ordeal, feeling conflicted yet resolute about how to handle the ongoing issues, particularly with my parents. Despite the damage to my father's reputation, I remain firm in my decision not to delete the post about Luna. Had my father taken serious actions, perhaps he could have prevented the fallout for her. The fact that the post negatively impacted her reputation was intentional and exactly the result I aimed for. I have no regrets about my decision not to involve the police, given my confidence in what I believe about Luna's involvement in illegal activities, including drug use. While I might not know all the specifics, it's clear her actions extend beyond mere drug use to other illicit dealings. Moreover, my father's role in covering up her actions while maintaining a facade of integrity as a police officer only deepens my resolve. There is simply no compelling reason for me to take down the post just to protect her image. My parents have tried reaching out multiple times, likely with genuine intent, but I have steadfastly ignored these overtures. Reading through the comments on my post reinforced my belief that there is no need for deletion. The criticism facing my family is a direct result of their own choices and behaviors. As for the vandalism, the repainting of my house is complete and the graffiti is gone. I've resolved to not wait for repayment from my parents or sister for the damages, accepting this loss as part of the broader conflict. My response has been to continue ignoring the flurry of messages from Luna, and I see no reason to change this approach. What I really seek is a genuine, public apology from her, an acknowledgement of her actions that goes beyond private admissions or quiet conversations. Only then might there be a path to reconciliation, but until that occurs, my stance remains unchanged. The post will stay online, serving as a testament to the truth as I see it and a marker of my boundaries that I refuse to let be crossed again. Until I receive a proper apology from Luna via email, I have no plans to delete the post. The issue here isn't just about an apology, it's about acknowledgement, and so far, the post has become well known among our circle. Many of our relatives, upon seeing the post, have chosen to distance themselves from Luna and my parents. No one even tries to communicate with them anymore. Most of the people we interact with have informed me that Luna hasn't shown any willingness to meet my demands, which further validates and supports my stance. What I ask for seems reasonable to me, yet they treat it as if I'm making outrageous demands on the entire world. Their persistent avoidance and dismissal of my feelings have become a pattern I've grown to expect over the years. The choice I made 10 years ago to distance myself from them has proven to be wise. They don't deserve a place in my life. Today, my parents attempted to visit me, but they didn't come alone. They brought our family lawyer and my uncle with them. Despite their show of force, I remained firm and did not remove the post. During their visit, my uncle even threatened legal action, showing me documents Luna had prepared to underline their seriousness about resolving the issue through legal means if necessary. However, neither the legal documents nor the presence of their lawyer intimidated me. When I invited Luna to join the discussion and see if we could resolve the issue face-to-face, my family sat silently, not making any moves to genuinely engage in dialogue. They insisted that deleting the post would prevent a potentially massive lawsuit and urged me to consider it seriously. When I didn't respond, my father, clearly frustrated, angrily pounded his fist on my coffee table, which was both upsetting and disrespectful. The table was not only expensive, but also special to me. When Luna finally arrived, she too tried to persuade me to forget the past, arguing it would save both of us a lot of trouble. However, I refused to back down. There was no compelling reason for me to forgive and forget. The continual lack of genuine acknowledgement or accountability on their part only reaffirmed my decision to keep the post up. It serves as a reminder of the unresolved issues and the need for a serious, honest confrontation about past hurts and ongoing conflicts within our family. I reached a point where I could no longer tolerate the situation. I made it clear to them that I was not open to negotiation. Frankly, I doubted their willingness to actually follow through with a lawsuit, knowing that it could expose them to even greater troubles. Despite my uncle's background as a trained police officer, his attempts to restrain Luna were futile as she angrily tried to punch a hole in my wall, an action that was not only alarming but also deeply upsetting. Following this aggressive act, Luna's next move only escalated my frustration. She pulled out a large sum of cash, threw it on my coffee table, and coldly offered more if needed before storming out. This display was not just shockingly unpleasant, but also incredibly disrespectful. In response to these events, I've decided to take the matter online to expose their behavior publicly and am seriously considering filing a restraining order against my family. Given the day's events, I feel justified in believing that legal intervention is necessary and could be beneficial. It is crucial to bring to light the hidden truths about my family. This incident underscores the deplorable nature of the individuals I'm dealing with. They truly represent the worst. Their actions have strengthened my resolve to confront them legally. I hope this narrative helps others see the malevolence of these individuals. I was taken aback by Luna's brazen behavior, which might stem from jealousy of the significantly better and more successful life I lead. As a successful businessperson, my life contrasts sharply with hers. She has been involved in illegal activities like drug dealing and lives a lifestyle marked by frivolous partying every weekend, which pales in comparison to my more fulfilling life. Not everyone looks up to her the way some do to me. When I met my parents again after the courtroom hearing, they tried to present a friendly facade, but the undercurrents of unresolved issues and their previous actions made any genuine reconciliation difficult. This complex dynamic has set the stage for further legal and personal battles, ones that I am now fully prepared to engage in to protect my interests and expose the truth. I found it hard to believe that a quick reconciliation was possible, especially after my father shockingly revealed to my sister that he intended to cut her out of his life. True reconciliation seemed far-fetched, and I felt vindicated in my decision to not give my parents another chance, trusting my gut that they were indeed unworthy of respect. As the court proceedings unfolded, I hoped for a verdict that would not favor them, and everything seemed to be leaning in that direction. I felt confident in handling the situation and was ready to confront all the issues that had surfaced. Experiencing this legal battle brought a sense of relief that necessary resolutions were being achieved. Throughout this ordeal, I have come to fully realize the extent of anger and frustration caused by my family's negative influence. While I'm not entirely sure if my approach was the most effective, confronting my emotions directly has been a validating process, and I take pride in facing these challenges head-on. The legal proceedings concluded much quicker than expected, thanks in part to surveillance footage and numerous testimonies shared via social media. My sister's illegal activities were systematically exposed. She was found guilty of vandalism and long-standing drug dealing, ultimately receiving a 5-year prison sentence. The involvement of my father in covering up misconduct within the police force came to light as well, resulting in his job loss. Meanwhile, my mother began receiving mental health support, and her condition has been gradually improving. The content I posted online received an overwhelmingly positive response, garnering support as it highlighted the abuse of power and corruption. The unexpected support reinforced my decision to bring the truth to light, confirming that it was the right move. Even now, as I continue to focus on managing my company, which is thriving, I feel a strong sense of accomplishment in addressing the issues caused by my family. Although my relationship with my sister and parents is far from reconciled, facing these challenges has given me a sense of closure and achievement. The process has been tough but ultimately rewarding, as it has allowed me to stand up against wrongdoing and advocate for justice. This journey has not only strengthened my resolve but also helped me grow both personally and professionally. Growing up, I always thought we were just an ordinary family, neither wealthy nor poor. However, everything changed with the arrival of my younger sister, Eva, when I was 9. My parents' joy at her birth seemed to overshadow their interest in me, shifting their attention almost entirely to her. Gradually, they began to offload all the household chores onto me, a practice known to some as the young carer phenomenon, where children under 16 are burdened with responsibilities typically meant for adults. My early culinary attempts were met with criticism, as I had never been formally taught how to cook. Each meal I prepared was a battle, trying to please with limited skills and resources, facing continual disapproval. Despite these challenges, I persevered, educating myself with beginner cookbooks from the library and navigating through trial and error. My childhood was marked by these demands, and this pattern of neglect continued into my adulthood. When I visited to celebrate Eva's birthday at our parents' home, the day took a surprising turn. Eva, quite forcefully, took the birthday cake I had brought, and in the scuffle, the cake was destroyed, its form altered tragically. To my disbelief, my parents found humor in the chaos, their laughter echoing as they watched the scene unfold. This incident was further complicated by a stark realization. Since I had married and changed my last name, my family started treating me as an outsider. The once familiar warmth of family ties had cooled, replaced by a strange indifference. My sister even contradicted herself by accepting a gift from me, only to declare later that the celebration was for family only, prompting me to leave. Feeling alienated, I made the difficult decision to stop financial support to my family. Expecting some reaction of concern, I was instead met with laughter as they dismissed my decision as a mere joke. A month later, their attitudes shifted when they realized the gravity of my decision and demanded an explanation. Reflecting on my journey, from achieving excellent grades throughout school to securing a reputable job after university, I've realized the strength it took to overcome the neglect and responsibilities thrust upon me at a young age. My story, marked by resilience and survival, underscores the complexities of familial relationships and the profound impact they have on one's identity and emotional well-being. From a young age, the bulk of household responsibilities, cooking, cleaning, and laundry, fell squarely on my shoulders. Each morning, I would hang the laundry before school and rush to bring it in after classes, weather permitting. If it rained and the clothes got wet, somehow that was my fault too, despite not having access to a TV or any other means to check the weather forecast. At the time, I accepted these duties without question, though in hindsight, I recognized how excessive they were for a child. While handling these chores, I often envied my sister, who was clearly the favorite and led a more pampered life. Amidst this environment, I became adept at navigating my parents' expectations, striving to avoid reprimands and hoping for praise that, unfortunately, never came. Despite mastering the art of cooking and excelling academically, the feedback from my parents was invariably critical. Even a simple acknowledgement of a well-prepared meal was twisted into a backhanded compliment about my clumsiness. Achieving full marks on a test was dismissed with remarks that undermined the value of intelligence in women. One summer during elementary school, I undertook an independent research project that was selected to represent my school at a national contest. Eager to share this achievement with my parents, hoping it might finally win me some recognition beyond mere housework or grades, their reaction was disheartening. They scolded me for wasting time on the project when I could have been more useful around the house. By the time I finished middle school, I had resigned myself to the reality that seeking approval from my parents was futile. My sister Eva, witnessing this dynamic, began to look down on me. Despite her mediocre academic performance, she ridiculed my aspirations to attend university, echoing the sentiment that our financial situation wouldn't allow for such luxuries. Despite the opposition, I resolved that if I could secure admission to a state university, I would manage the tuition myself. After much pleading, they grudgingly allowed me to pursue higher education. University life, however, was far from the liberating experience I had hoped for. My parents refused to assist with tuition and even expected me to contribute to household expenses, despite knowing that my earnings from part-time jobs were earmarked for my education. This left me no choice but to sacrifice sleep and social life to balance work, studies, and home duties, depriving me of any fond memories of college. It was during this tumultuous time that I met John at my part-time job. He was the first person who genuinely seemed to appreciate and value me. After 1 year of dating, we got married when I was 28. Initially, my parents opposed the marriage, but I managed to convince them. Since then, John and I have built a life together, and I've kept a deliberate distance from my family home. Living with John has been a stark contrast to the environment I grew up in. For the first time, I felt valued and loved, a stark departure from the feelings of isolation and neglect that characterized my upbringing. This new chapter with John has allowed me to slowly heal from the scars of my past and redefine what family truly means to me. After a long hiatus, I decided to return to my parents' home for my sister's birthday. Holding a birthday cake and a gift, I rang the intercom. My sister, playing around, answered with a playful, "Who is it?" I urged her to stop joking and let me in quickly since I brought a cake and a gift. To my astonishment, she burst through the door, yanked the cake box from my hands, and hurled it at me, declaring in a half-serious tone, "I can't put anything in my mouth that someone else has brought because it's scary." The cake was ruined, its shape distorted by the impact. Behind her, my parents were doubled over in laughter, finding amusement in the spectacle of me covered in cake remnants. Amidst their laughter, they threw jabs about me being a stranger now because I had changed my last name after marriage. My sister chimed in, reinforcing the notion that a different last name meant we were no longer family. I was stunned by their cruel humor and the cold reception. Their laughter did not cease as they continued to mock me. Kate was always more of a housekeeper than a daughter, they joked. They even ridiculed my appearance, saying they had always hoped for a cute child, implying I was not. At that moment, I felt a chill of realization. Perhaps my affection for them had withered completely. These parents, whom I had once feared and revered, now seemed just pitiful and absurd to me. Despite their earlier taunts about family, my sister grabbed the gift I had brought, contradicting her earlier stance. My mother then told me to leave since they were celebrating with family only, dismissing me with a wave as if shooing an animal. Feeling alienated, I asked once more if I was no longer considered family, to which my father sarcastically questioned who I was, pretending not to recognize me. For over 22 years, I had strived to please such unreasonable people, and staying in that home felt increasingly like a mistake, almost as if I had been brainwashed. Finally, I declared that if they wished to treat me as a stranger, then we should do so consistently. I announced the end of any financial help I had been giving, a statement that prompted them to mock me further, accusing me of lying about my contributions and saying it was no wonder I was unloved. With their insults fading behind me, I walked away, feeling surprisingly unburdened. For years, I had sought their love and approval, but now, free from their toxic presence, I couldn't understand why I had ever thought it necessary. Returning home, my husband John, who always greeted me with praise and love, noticed my disheveled state but simply suggested I take a bath, showing his care by respecting my need for space. A month later, my estranged family showed up at our doorstep, angry and demanding explanations. They accused me of causing unspecified troubles and complained about not being able to afford private university tuition for my sister, who attended a prestigious institution that accepted students with moderate grades, unlike the state university I had attended through self-funding. Despite John's advice to avoid them, I faced their accusations, yet their irrational behavior only affirmed my decision to stay away. After years of keeping my distance, I returned to my parents' house for my sister's birthday, a decision motivated by familial obligation rather than desire. As I stood at the door, cake and gift in hand, my sister mockingly questioned my identity through the intercom. When she finally opened the door and saw it was indeed me, she snatched the cake and threw it at me, claiming she couldn't trust food brought by others. Behind her, my parents laughed, apparently amused by my misfortune. In their mockery, they pointed out my changed last name since marrying and claimed it estranged me from the family. The whole scene left me in shock. The parents and sister I once knew now treated me like a complete outsider. Despite this, I kept my composure and tried to reason with them about the financial contributions I had been making to the household. I explained that I had regularly deposited money into a household account under my father's management to cover not just general expenses, but also the cost of food, as I was often the one cooking. When I decided to get married, my parents initially objected, fearing they would lose their convenient housekeeper. To ease their resistance, I had agreed to double my financial support, a promise they conveniently forgot once my sister's tuition issues arose. It turned out that my sister had been attending a private university with moderate effort, supported by tutoring that didn't require her to lift a finger at home. She never understood the burden of household chores or part-time work. During our conversation, my parents tried to blame their financial mismanagement on the cessation of my contributions, but the truth soon surfaced. My mother had mistaken my contributions for my father's earnings, and he had thought they were for my sister's supposed part-time job. Even more astonishing was the revelation that my grandfather had been funding my sister's tuition, yet my parents still demanded more money from me, money that my mother had squandered on luxury goods. As the argument escalated among them, they tried to shift their tactics and suddenly began praising me, claiming how proud they were and that all their strict upbringing was justified because of my success. Just as they were attempting to coax me back into their lives with their newfound appreciation, my husband, John, intervened. He sternly reminded them that I was not a resource to be exploited. His assertiveness shocked my family, but it also emboldened me. Despite their protests and attempts to reconnect, John made it clear our ties were severed and they should leave. As they reluctantly exited, Eva lingered, hinting at her ongoing tuition needs. But before she could elaborate, she was startled by John's firm stance and quickly retreated. In the days that followed, they didn't give up easily, appearing at our home and calling frequently. Despite these interruptions, I avoided further confrontations, even using alternate entrances and spending time away from home to evade Eva. One day, however, she caught me off guard and apologized, admitting her previous misconceptions about me, influenced by our parents. Her sudden apology, while unexpected, seemed disingenuous and gave me chills. It was clear she was still primarily concerned about her tuition payments. This encounter only affirmed my decision to maintain distance, protect my peace, and build a life with John, free from the manipulative dynamics of my family. I had long distanced myself from my family due to their relentless demands and lack of emotional support. However, after years of separation, I reluctantly returned to my parents' house for my sister's birthday. Upon my arrival, carrying a birthday cake and gift, my sister greeted me not with warmth, but by snatching the cake from my hands and throwing it at me. Her actions were followed by laughter from my parents, who mocked the change in my last name since my marriage, suggesting that I was no longer a part of the family. Despite their hurtful behavior, I attempted to remain calm and explain the situation, especially regarding the financial contributions I had been making to the family. Over the years, I had been the one managing the household expenses, often sacrificing my own needs to ensure that my sister could attend a private university without needing to work part-time like I had. However, as the discussion unfolded, it became clear that my mother had been misusing the funds meant for my sister's tuition on luxury items, leading to financial strain that they now expected me to alleviate. As the argument escalated, my family suddenly switched their tone, praising me for my academic and professional achievements in an attempt to manipulate me into resuming financial support. This encounter left me more resolved than ever to sever ties with them, a decision supported by my husband, John. He intervened when my sister began making threats and acting aggressively toward me, reaffirming that I was no longer just a financial resource for them to exploit. Following this incident, my parents and sister frequently appeared at our home, causing disturbances and demanding money. Their actions forced us to involve the police and apologize to our neighbors for the repeated disruptions. Recognizing the ongoing risk and the need for peace, John and I decided to move without disclosing our new location to anyone, not even our neighbors. Despite our precautions, my family continued to seek us out, even showing up at my in-laws' home, demanding to know where we had moved. They claimed that my independence was causing them financial hardship, appealing to my in-laws for sympathy. However, my in-laws, fully aware of my family's abusive history, firmly rejected their demands and offered me emotional support, reinforcing that they now considered me their daughter. This gesture of acceptance from my in-laws was incredibly moving, especially given the stark contrast to my own family's treatment. They provided the emotional solace that I had longed for, and with their support, John and I continued to build our lives free from the toxic influence of my parents and sister. Their refusal to disclose our whereabouts shielded us from further harassment, allowing us to maintain our safety and well-being in our new home. After a long absence, I reluctantly visited my parents' house for my sister's birthday. The reception was cold. My sister mockingly snatched the birthday cake I brought, throwing it at me, while my parents laughed, making snide remarks about my changed last name for marriage, suggesting I was no longer part of the family. They seemed to find amusement in the spectacle, solidifying my feeling of alienation. Despite their hostility, I explained my past financial contributions and sacrifices, which they conveniently ignored, choosing instead to praise me for my academic and professional success when it suited their agenda of manipulation. My husband John stood by me, affirming that I was not a resource for them to exploit. The confrontations escalated, with my family frequently showing up at our home, demanding money and causing disturbances, prompting us to involve the police and apologize to our neighbors for the disruptions. Recognizing the need for peace, John and I decided to move without disclosing our new location. Despite our precautions, my family continued their attempts to contact us, even confronting my in-laws, demanding to know our whereabouts and accusing us of causing them financial hardship. My in-laws, understanding my difficult past, supported us and firmly rejected their demands, offering me emotional support. This support from my in-laws was incredibly moving, especially given the contrast to my own family's treatment. They provided the emotional solace I had longed for, allowing John and me to build our lives free from the toxic influence of my parents and sister. Their steadfast protection and understanding reinforced our decision to maintain our distance and build a peaceful life together. It all felt like a distant past until my family confronted me again, questioning if I had been mistreated or brainwashed by my in-laws. My father gripped my shoulder firmly, and my mother, with feigned concern, pleaded for me to return home. My sister Eva added to the emotional plea with a friendly smile, urging me to reconsider our family bonds. Their insinuations that I was being poorly treated by my in-laws infuriated me. I raised my voice, ready to recount the countless times they had mistreated me, which made my mother panic and Eva flustered. Just as the situation escalated, my father shouted to end the confrontation, but at that moment, police officers appeared, summoned by my husband due to the commotion. My parents and Eva tried to downplay the scene as a minor domestic disagreement, quickly apologizing and insisting on the importance of family. Yet, it was clear to me that their apologies were shallow, driven by self-interest rather than genuine remorse. In the past, I might have been swayed by their emotional tactics, but having experienced true affection for my husband and in-laws, I could easily see through their facade. During the argument, my father accidentally struck a police officer trying to intervene, leading to their detention. Despite it being an accident, the situation highlighted the ongoing dysfunction within my family. As they were taken away, I informed them that my husband and I, supported by my in-laws, were moving away due to his job transfer, making any further visits from them pointless. Standing there with the support of my in-laws, I felt a profound sense of relief and validation for the decision to sever ties with my family. My husband, who had been initially hesitant, now fully supported this decision, and my father-in-law offered a kind smile, reinforcing the warm, supportive family environment I had longed for and now cherished. After enduring a challenging family situation fraught with dysfunction and misfortune, my life has taken a positive turn. My parents, plagued by illness, were forced to leave their jobs and struggled without access to adequate medical care. Additionally, the financial support from our grandparents for my sister Eva's tuition ceased, leading to her expulsion from university due to unpaid fees. Finding herself without many options, Eva moved to a rural area to work at a casino that offered employee housing. Unfortunately, the environment proved toxic for her, and she fell into a gambling addiction, spending most of her earnings at the casino itself. Meanwhile, my husband and I have been building a stable and joyful life in our new home. We are focused on our careers and maintain a healthy relationship with my in-laws, who live nearby. Together, we've started planning a future that balances personal and professional growth. Discussions about living arrangements have been positive and fruitful. We are pooling resources to invest in a duplex home. This new property, expected to be completed in about a year, will allow us to live close to my in-laws in a connected yet independent manner. Looking forward, we envision a harmonious life as a family of 5, fostering relationships that support each other's well-being and happiness, contrasting sharply with the turmoil of my past familial experiences. At 23 years old, just out of college, I am saddled with a staggering $210,000 in debt. Even more troubling is the apparent favoritism my parents show towards my twin sister, Sarah. When I finished high school, I was eager to study law and aimed to secure a scholarship. However, my parents, doubtful of my chances, urged me to take out student loans to cover the costs. Being under 20 at the time and unfamiliar with the intricacies of financial loans, I trusted their judgment and applied for the loans, with my parents handling most of the paperwork. I signed where they told me to, not fully understanding what I was getting into. Later, I learned that I had been awarded a partial scholarship. My parents reassured me that it would cover half of my tuition, and they would manage the rest. This scholarship meant I only needed a loan for half of the tuition fees. The university also provided support for meals and accommodation, along with quarterly scholarships, which further reduced my need for borrowed funds. Throughout my college years, I worked part-time at a cafe to support myself and rarely discussed financial matters at home. Over the same period, my parents hoped Sarah would either go to law school or choose a stable career, but she opted for a career in modeling. After graduation, I decided against pursuing further degrees and instead focused on gaining practical work experience. I started an internship at a law firm. It was then that I received a repayment notice from the bank for the $210,000 loan. Upon reviewing the details, I found discrepancies. The tuition for the 7 semesters I attended, even with interest, should have been less than $80,000. Yet, the amount demanded was double. Including what my parents said they contributed towards my dormitory expenses, the total didn't even reach $95,000. This left me questioning the discrepancy and where the rest of the money had gone. Upon realizing a full tuition fee of $210,000 had been charged to my account, I reached out to the bank for clarification. They informed me the total amount was withdrawn as a precaution in case my scholarship, which covered half of the tuition, failed to come through. This explanation puzzled me, as I knew the scholarship was also intended to cover additional expenses like meals and lodging. Despite my parents' justifications, I sensed dishonesty and decided to address the matter in person. Last weekend, during a visit, my persistent inquiries initially met with diversion, but eventually led to a confession after several back and forths. It was revealed that the surplus funds had been redirected to cover my sister Sarah's tuition fees. This revelation angered me, as it seemed to confirm a pattern of favoritism towards her. I argued that such overprotection was detrimental to her growth. In defense, my parents insisted on their equal love for both children. They explained that they hadn't planned to use my scholarship for Sarah, but her poor high school grades made her ineligible for a loan, and they had no other assets after using their home as collateral for my tuition. Determined, I declared that I would only pay $95,000, suggesting that Sarah and our parents should jointly cover the remaining $115,000. The following morning, my father sought a serious discussion, yet it circled back to the financial arrangements. He shared his parental duty to support both his children's futures, revealing that despite his financial sacrifices for Sarah's education, she chose a modeling career instead. My sarcastic inquiry about her achievements in that field was met with a negative response, although he expressed his non-interference in her pursuits. I regretted my sharp words, aware it was too late to retract them. I reiterated that bearing a $210,000 debt was unreasonable. My father countered by highlighting my stable income and the prospect of increased earnings as I moved to full-time employment, suggesting the loan repayment was manageable within my financial scope. When I questioned my father about the financial burden of the loan, he noted that at 23 years old, and with a stable career ahead of me, I could feasibly pay off the loan in about 6 years, unlike my sister Sarah, whose future prospects were less certain. He argued that because of my secure financial standing, I should accept the responsibility for both our tuitions. However, I couldn't understand why my financial stability should obligate me to cover her expenses as well, especially given her uncertain career path. His reasoning further delved into traditional roles, suggesting that women needed to prepare to be good wives and mothers, a viewpoint I found frustratingly outdated and disagreed with vehemently. I was left doubting whether I should really pay the additional $115,000 for Sarah, questioning whether it was a genuine obligation or just an expectation because I was already earning. I sought advice from friends and classmates, who had mixed reactions. Some felt that if Sarah was supposed to contribute, I should too. But most felt it was unfair to expect me to cover everything and believed Sarah should at least contribute partially. Interestingly, educational loans are usually tied directly to the student for whom they are intended and cannot be transferred to another person. Typically, these funds are deposited directly into the university's account, and any excess is given to the student for personal expenses like meals, lodging, and textbooks. Given the financial aid I received, much of my living expenses were supposed to be managed through part-time work. However, unbeknownst to me at the time, my parents withdrew the remaining $115,000 from my personal bank account and redirected it to Sarah. This was possible because they had access to my account since I was 20 and not fully aware of how banking transactions worked. In retrospect, my lack of banking knowledge and oversight was a mistake. It was only after doing some online research and questioning my parents further that I began to uncover the depth of their actions regarding the withdrawal of these funds. It became evident that they had not only withdrawn the money, but had also utilized it in ways I was initially unaware of. This revelation highlighted the complexities of familial financial responsibilities and the importance of transparency and consent in such matters. Despite my parents' claims, there was never a situation where the expenses actually amounted to $115,000. In a shocking revelation, they admitted to fabricating fake invoices to justify the withdrawals. They insisted that they had no other choice, but that wasn't true. There were indeed other options available that didn't involve dipping into my funds. Several times, I found myself so angry that I considered moving out, but I soon realized that leaving wouldn't solve the real issue. The loan was under my name, and any default would harm my credit, not theirs. The financial burden, therefore, was mine to bear, and I made it clear to them that they needed to be ready to cover the $115,000 if Sarah failed to repay it. My mother tried to guilt me by saying that as their only daughter, it was my duty to look after the family and Sarah. She even compared me to other relatives who had financially supported their parents by buying houses or cars, criticizing me for not contributing in a similar manner. This argument baffled me. Does being their only daughter imply that Sarah isn't also their daughter? I was frustrated by their flawed logic. I had initially kept Sarah out of these discussions, but my parents insisted on shielding her from any stress related to our financial issues. They claimed she was dealing with mental instability from the pressures of her work and current situation. Yet, contradictorily, she seemed cheerful on her social media, regularly posting pictures of herself at parties with friends. My parents defended this by saying she needed to maintain a happy facade online to build a celebrity persona, which I found completely unreasonable. Eventually, I decided it was crucial to involve Sarah directly in the financial conversation. It was time to stop excessively coddling her. That night, I waited up for her, knowing she usually came home after midnight. With my parents asleep, I saw it as the perfect moment to confront her about the situation and discuss everything openly, hoping to find a way forward together. When I heard the sound of Sarah's car pulling up, I grabbed some ice cream and pretended to be casually enjoying it, hoping to make our encounter seem like just a coincidence. As she walked in, I offered her a spoonful and casually began chatting about things that might interest her, like recent tales about our cousins and neighbors. I even sprinkled in some gossip about her school friends, hoping to make the atmosphere relaxed and friendly. Despite our lack of closeness, partly due to how our parents had pampered her, I wanted our interaction to be natural and not strained. During our conversation, I casually inquired about her work, trying to gauge if she faced any challenges. She appeared to be doing well professionally, so I shifted the topic to her personal development and any new skills she might have picked up to chase her dreams. Her answer was a simple no. Then, I cautiously brought up the subject of the $115,000, asking how she had spent the money. She seemed taken aback and claimed ignorance about the funds. I clarified that I was referring to the student loan and probed her on its use. Contrary to my fear of frivolous expenditures like cosmetic surgeries, she confessed that the money went towards funding lavish parties and vacations with friends, a revelation that left me dismayed. I had maintained my composure until then, but learning how she had carelessly squandered such a significant amount sparked my anger. I couldn't fathom her disregard for the financial burden she placed on our family, and my frustration was evident. Sarah defensively retorted that it had nothing to do with me and argued that I shouldn't expect her to repay money that was spent frivolously. Our discussion quickly escalated into a heated argument. Our rising voices eventually woke our parents, who rushed in to diffuse the tension. They reprimanded me, questioning why I would confront Sarah so harshly and press her about the money. In their eyes, I was at fault for creating conflict, and when I questioned their continual indulgence in her behavior, they dismissed it as a mere financial issue. But for me, the real problem wasn't just the money. It was Sarah's reckless spending and her apparent lack of remorse. Normally, I would have remained quiet, but this situation demanded confrontation. This time, I couldn't hold back. When I confronted my parents about Sarah's misuse of the funds, they attempted to pacify me, suggesting we discuss it calmly the next morning. However, I demanded an immediate resolution and adamantly refused to cover Sarah's extravagant expenses. Sarah retorted dismissively, claiming that as long as her tuition was paid, the rest was her concern. She pointed out that since the loan was in my name, she wasn't legally responsible, which was technically true. Feeling utterly defeated and realizing I had reached my breaking point, I insisted that either they or Sarah should pay for these frivolous expenses. Then, I stormed out and spent the night at a college friend's place. The following morning, I returned to my dorm without speaking to anyone. The previous advice from the bank officer, whom I had initially contacted, proved invaluable. He was supportive and explained the loan process in detail. After my intense conflict, I consulted him again, and he helped me discover that the invoices had been falsified and the funds withdrawn fraudulently. He mentioned that I could potentially sue my parents over this, but first I needed to gather all the original documents. Since I was planning to move from the dorm to an apartment post-graduation and had already started packing, finding these documents wouldn't be straightforward. I spent several days meticulously searching through emails and various apps to locate all the necessary invoices. A few days later, I presented copies of these documents to my parents. Under normal circumstances, this might have brought me some relief, but the overwhelming anger and sense of betrayal persisted. I couldn't forgive them for their disregard and manipulation. Determined to make a stand and do something they would never expect, I resolved to take decisive action. This meant potentially pursuing legal avenues to address the fraudulent use of my loan, a move I knew they would dread but one I felt necessary to protect my financial future and hold those responsible accountable. After discovering the extent of the misuse of funds, I sent Sarah excerpts from legal provisions related to loan fraud, detailing the severe penalties and charges for fraud if the misused amount between $80,000 and $115,000 was not repaid. I made it clear to her that I had all the original invoices and wouldn't hesitate to take legal action against our parents to rectify the situation. Sarah didn't respond directly to my warnings. Later, I received a voicemail from my father. I chose not to answer his call, so he left a message instead, accusing me of shirking my responsibilities towards my sister and acting out of greed. Despite our closeness in age, just 3 minutes apart, his words stung because had Sarah used the money responsibly or shown any remorse for her actions, I might have been more inclined to negotiate. However, her apparent pride in her frivolous spending left me dismayed. I shared the message I had sent to Sarah with my parents, which prompted a sharp reply from my mother, labeling me as greedy, stubborn, and selfish. Unmoved by their accusations, I stood firm, insisting that they needed to pay the amount owed. After several intense discussions and exchanges of blame, my father requested time to assess their financial situation and promised to get back to me. A week passed without any follow-up, leaving me to contemplate the necessity of my threats to sue, which might have seemed harsh, but felt like my only viable option. I could not afford to shoulder this financial burden alone. The funds were part of the savings I had carefully managed up to that point. I issued another stern warning to my parents. They must pay the $115,000 or face a lawsuit for fraud. More than a month has gone by since my last contact with my parents. Although there was an 8-month grace period before loan repayments needed to begin, I had already secured a job and started making payments. This was now my 3rd loan installment, and it would still take a long time to pay off even half of it. The situation remained unresolved, and the strain on our family relationships deepened. Despite the challenging circumstances, I still needed to pay off the remaining half of the loan. In an attempt to clarify their stance, I sent another message to my father but received no response. Unexpectedly, a few days later, my parents and Sarah turned up at my apartment. I tried calling my father to discuss things calmly, but instead, my mother started shouting at me in the hallway, accusing me of being shameless. They had indeed provided me with a good education, but I wanted to avoid causing a scene in my neighborhood, so I invited them inside. Once we were indoors, Sarah joined my mother in berating me, hurling spiteful accusations. I couldn't hold back and confronted Sarah about her reckless spending of such a significant sum of money, insisting that she needed to repay it. Sarah retorted that she hadn't directly asked for the money and argued that since our parents had given it to her willingly, she felt no obligation to repay it. This rationale seemed utterly unreasonable to me. Amidst the heated argument, my mother tried to pressure me by reminding me that they had mortgaged the house for my future. Losing my patience, I responded sharply, suggesting they should let the bank auction the house to settle the debt, if that's what it took. This stark statement made them realize the seriousness of my intentions. The persuasion halted abruptly, and they left my apartment without another word. About a month later, I reached out to my father once more to remind him of the outstanding payment. He explained that he was planning to partition part of the house for rental to generate income, hoping to alleviate Sarah's financial burden and contribute towards repaying the loan. While it was regrettable that the house needed to be modified for these reasons, I felt strongly that the responsibility should fall on Sarah. She often blamed me for devaluing the property, but I could no longer accept such accusations. Currently, I was the one burdened with the loan payments, and I was determined to ensure that they acknowledged and addressed the financial responsibilities that were rightfully theirs. When I spoke with the bank branch manager about the loan terms, he informed me that there was no other option available. $10,000 was still outstanding, and it would take 4 years to repay it completely. During this period, my parents were given a grace period to gather the necessary funds. Hopefully, by the end of these 4 years, they could provide the money required. Over these 4 years, my life has seen remarkable changes. I am now working as a corporate lawyer in the US and have recently gotten engaged to my college sweetheart. We plan to get married next year. I am grateful for having managed to pay off the loan and for my career success, but it saddens me deeply that my relationship with my parents has deteriorated further. Initially, my father agreed to rent out part of our house and use the rental income to help pay off Sarah's portion of the loan. Payments were made regularly at first, but as soon as my father discovered that I had secured a high-paying job, he stopped making them. He occasionally blamed delayed rent payments from tenants or cited rising medical expenses for my mother and his own business debts as reasons for these delays. For the past 3 years, he has used various excuses to defer payments, leaving me as the sole contributor. My fiancé revealed that Sarah wasn't solely dependent on our parents for financial support. This intrigued me, and when I pressed him for details, he pointed out that my mother and Sarah consistently showcased expensive designer clothing and jewelry at family gatherings. He even provided photos of them at several events as evidence. These photos made it painfully clear that my parents still viewed me primarily as a financial resource, which deepened my disappointment and mistrust. Unable to contain my frustration any longer, I sent my father a final ultimatum, declaring that if they failed to meet their obligations, I would take legal action. Determined to resolve this matter swiftly, I leaned heavily on my fiancé for support. Given that his sister is a police officer, he consulted her and enlisted her professional help. She promptly contacted my parents, warning them that I was prepared to file a police report if the outstanding payments were not made soon. This firm stance was a tough but necessary step to protect my financial future and hold my family accountable for their commitments. As the situation escalated, it became evident that this was primarily a civil matter, not a criminal one. To avoid the complications of court proceedings, my parents looked for an informal resolution. Despite the deep discomfort I felt in taking such drastic steps, I was left with no other choice. Eventually, my father reluctantly agreed to resume and complete the payments. However, Once the loan was fully settled, my father sent me a stern letter, painfully declaring his decision to disown me. The letter bluntly stated, "Never contact us again." This sudden and harsh rejection from my own family left me utterly shocked and heartbroken. I broke down in tears. During this incredibly tough time, my fiancé was my rock. He comforted me, assuring me that their actions stemmed from greed and spite, not from any fault of my own. The pain of being treated in such a way by my own family was overwhelming. Amidst my tears, I battled with feelings of guilt and even contemplated returning the money they had paid just to ease the situation. However, as I began to regain my composure, I came to a painful realization. No matter how much I tried to help and please them, my parents would likely never feel any remorse for their actions. This realization sparked a significant change within me. I found the strength to live my life unaffected by the criticisms or harsh judgments of others, learning to value my well-being and the new family I was building with my fiancé. Moving forward, I embraced the freedom and peace that came with accepting that I could not change their views, only how I responded to them.
You're being completely unreasonable, Olivia. Nathan needs this more than you do. My mom hissed, waving the property documents in my face during what was supposed to be her joyful birthday celebration. Her eyes narrowed as she continued. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself and those plants of yours. The words struck me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stood frozen in the elegant dining room of the house I'd emptied my entire savings account to purchase, my chest tightening painfully as my carefully constructed world fell apart around me. My name is Olivia Harper, and at 32, I never imagined my own family would betray me so callously. As a care worker at Sunrise Assisted Living Facility, I've spent the last decade working punishing overnight shifts, covering for coworkers during holidays, and saving every possible dollar. When my mother and stepfather faced losing their home to mounting debt, I didn't hesitate to offer my life savings, $175,000, to help them secure a new place to live. The agreement wasn't just clear, it was explicitly documented. The house would be in my name since I had provided the entire down payment. But apparently, written agreements mean nothing when family decides you don't deserve it. My half-brother Nathan, my mother's golden child from her second marriage, leaned against the doorframe with that infuriating self-satisfied smirk plastered across his face. He'd never contributed a single penny to our parents' financial stability, always too preoccupied with developing his creative vision, while bouncing between one failed design project and another. But now, at 36, he suddenly had a wife and a baby on the way, which somehow made him more entitled to the house I'd sacrificed everything to buy. We've already transferred everything to Nathan's name, my stepfather Stephen announced flatly, his eyes fixed on his expensive watch rather than meeting my gaze. You should feel good about helping your brother provide a stable home for his growing family. The casual dismissiveness with which he disregarded my years of sacrifice made my heart pound with fury. The beautiful two-story craftsman house I'd fallen completely in love with, the one I'd pictured filled with family gatherings and holiday celebrations for years to come, was being handed to someone who hadn't earned a single brick of it. Glancing around at the faces of relatives and friends who'd gathered to celebrate my mother's birthday, which I'd spent weeks planning and paid for entirely, I noticed the uncomfortable glances and whispered exchanges. My Aunt Gloria, my father's sister who'd been more of a maternal figure to me than my actual mother, stood by the fireplace, her expression a mixture of shock and disgust. My best friend Vanessa, who'd witnessed firsthand how I'd worked myself to physical exhaustion to save that money, clutched her wine glass so tightly her knuckles had turned white. This is completely wrong, I managed to say, my voice quivering with a toxic mix of rage and heartbreak. That money represented everything I've worked for over the past decade. We had a signed agreement that you're violating. Oh please, stop with the dramatics, my mother sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes like I was a petulant teenager instead of a grown woman being robbed. You're a care worker. You'll build up your savings again eventually. Nathan needs a proper family home now. It's not like you have children or a husband to worry about. That's when something fundamental inside me fractured. A lifetime of being the responsible daughter, the reliable caretaker. The one who consistently sacrificed my own needs for others came crashing down in that moment. As I looked at their entitled, dismissive expressions, I knew with absolute certainty this betrayal would not stand unchallenged. They had absolutely no idea what I was capable of when pushed past my breaking point. Growing up, I was always acutely aware of the stark difference in how Nathan and I were treated. After my dad died when I was 6, my mom remarried Stephen barely 11 months later. Nathan burst into our lives like a hurricane, instantly becoming the sun around which our family revolved. While I dedicated my weekends to studying and working at the local CVS pharmacy to build my college fund, Nathan received new gaming systems, designer clothes, and endless fresh starts whenever he failed. I worked my way through my degree in social care, pulling exhausting night shifts as a home health aide while accumulating student loans I'm still struggling to pay off today. Every time Nathan's creative endeavors collapsed, the graphic design studio, the custom t-shirt website, the digital art marketplace, my parents would drain their accounts to keep him afloat. I watched in silent frustration as they refinanced their house 3 separate times to cover his financial disasters, saying nothing even as I saw their retirement security evaporating. When they called me 6 months ago, voices breaking with desperation because foreclosure was imminent, I didn't hesitate. I had been carefully saving for my own modest home, dreaming of a small place with enough yard space for the garden I'd always longed for. Instead, I transferred my entire savings to them, foolishly believing this selfless act would finally earn me equal standing in their eyes. We spent countless weekends touring properties together, and I immediately connected with the craftsman on Oakwood Avenue. The real estate agent worked tirelessly to make the purchase possible, and I signed all the initial documents as the legal owner. You're such an incredible blessing, sweetie, my mother had said then, embracing me tightly with tears in her eyes. We'll make this work together as a family, I promise. I desperately wanted to believe her. I needed so badly to trust her words that I deliberately ignored all the warning signals, the hushed phone conversations with Nathan, the legal consultations I wasn't invited to attend, the constant delays with finalizing the paperwork. Vanessa had tried warning me. Olivia, please get absolutely everything documented legally, she'd urged over lunch one day. I don't trust them to honor your investment. But I defended them fiercely, convinced that despite their obvious favoritism toward Nathan, they wouldn't outright steal from me. After all, what kind of mother would betray her own daughter so completely? The day before my mother's birthday celebration, I'd spent hours at HomeGoods selecting decorations for what I believed would be my investment property. I bought luxurious bath towels, decorative throw pillows for the living room, and even a handcrafted welcome sign reading "Where Love Makes a Home." Now all those thoughtfully chosen items felt like cruel reminders scattered throughout a house that had been stolen out from under me. Standing in that dining room, watching Nathan swagger around as though he'd actually earned any part of this home, I thought about all the overnight shifts I'd worked at the care as the birthday celebration continued around me. My thoughts were spiraling wildly. Guests were beginning to make their excuses to leave, offering awkward congratulations to Nathan while deliberately avoiding eye contact with me. I sat alone at the dining table, staring numbly at my phone screen, when Vanessa slid quietly into the chair beside me. "You need to call Elijah immediately," she whispered urgently, referring to her brother. who specialized in real estate law. Something about this deed transfer feels completely illegal. They couldn't possibly have done this legitimately without your signature on multiple documents. Just then, Nathan strolled past with his wife Amber, loudly discussing their renovation plans as though I wasn't sitting right there. Facility, the countless Christmases and Thanksgivings I'd missed with friends. The dating opportunities I'd cancelled, the vacations I'd never allowed myself all to save. That money. They hadn't merely stolen my financial security. They'd stolen irreplaceable years of my life. We'll definitely start by completely gutting the kitchen, he announced, running his fingers possessively along the quartz countertop I had personally selected. Maybe take out that wall to create an open concept space, really transform it into our vision. My stomach twisted violently with nausea. Glancing around the room, I spotted a familiar folder of paperwork my mother had shown me when we initially made our agreement. It was still sitting exactly where she always kept important documents, on top of the antique secretary desk in the corner. While everyone was thoroughly distracted by Nathan's grandiose renovation plans, I quietly retrieved the folder and slipped it into my tote bag. I need some fresh air before I completely lose it, I murmured to Vanessa, heading toward the back patio. Once outside, I pulled out the documents with trembling fingers. There it was, the original agreement I'd signed stating explicitly that the house would be registered in my name in exchange for providing the entire down payment. Then I found something even more damning, a letter from their attorney dated just 2 weeks earlier, explicitly warning them that transferring the deed without my formal consent constituted fraud. My phone vibrated with a text from my mother. Stop hiding outside. Come back in and show some happiness for your brother's blessing. That single message crystallized everything I needed to do. This wasn't merely about the money anymore, this was about finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of being pushed aside and taken for granted. With shaking hands, I texted Elijah, "Are you available tomorrow morning? I need urgent legal assistance regarding property fraud." His response appeared almost instantly. "Vanessa just texted me about the situation. Meet me at my office at 9 a.m. sharp. Bring every document you have." Walking back inside, I found my mother and Stephen huddled with Nathan in the living room, undoubtedly scheming more ways to claim my house as their own. They glanced up as I entered, their expressions a mixture of irritation and dismissal. "Finally decided to stop overreacting?" my mother asked, her eyebrow arched condescendingly. I managed a composed smile, clearly surprising them. "Actually, I want to thank you all," I said with remarkable steadiness. "You've helped me see everything with perfect clarity." They exchanged confused glances, obviously expecting tears or emotional pleading. But I was completely finished with begging, done being the dependable daughter who always sacrificed while receiving nothing but contempt in return. As I gathered my belongings to leave, I heard Nathan laugh and declare smugly, "See? She's totally fine. She'll get over it by next week." I turned back one last time, meeting his gaze head-on. "No, Nathan, I won't simply get over it. But I promise you'll wish I had." The next morning I sat anxiously in Elijah's sleek downtown office, my hands wrapped around a steaming latte to stop them from trembling. My stomach was twisted in knots as he methodically reviewed the documents spread across his glass desk, occasionally tapping notes into his tablet and shaking his head with visible disbelief. After what felt like an eternity of silence, he finally looked up at me with an encouraging smile. "Olivia, they've made an absolutely catastrophic legal mistake here," he said, holding up the attorney's warning letter like a trophy. "This deed transfer isn't just questionable, it's textbook fraud. You provided the entire down payment, your signature is on all the initial paperwork, and there's explicit documentation of the original agreement. They legally cannot transfer ownership of a house that was contractually meant to be yours." "But they've already done it," I replied, my voice breaking with emotion. "The deed is now in Nathan's name. I checked the county records this morning. A fraudulent transfer can absolutely be reversed, Elijah explained confidently, reaching for his phone. And I happen to have a close colleague at the district attorney's office who specializes in real estate fraud cases. What your family did isn't just unethical. It could lead to serious criminal charges, including felonies. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs at his words. Criminal charges? You mean actual jail time? Despite everything they'd done. The thought of my mother in handcuffs made my chest tighten with conflict. I don't want to see my family in prison. Even after what they did to me, that feels extreme. Elijah leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Listen carefully, Olivia, he said firmly. They stole $175,000 from you. That's grand theft by any legal definition. They committed documented fraud, and based on these bank transfer records, it appears someone forged your signature on multiple financial documents. They're counting on your compassion and your history of self-sacrifice to ensure you won't fight back. They're weaponizing your kindness against you. He was painfully right. My entire life, they had exploited my tendency to be the understanding one, the reliable one who would sacrifice without complaint, the caretaker who put everyone else's needs before her own. As we talked through the legal options, my phone continuously vibrated with notifications. I glanced down to see a flood of messages from my mother, alternating between emotional manipulation, "How could you do this to family?" and dismissive demands, "Stop this childish behavior immediately and call me." What do you genuinely want to happen here? Elijah asked, studying my face carefully. Now what you think you should want, what do you truly want? What outcome do you actually desire? I took a deep breath, suddenly feeling clarity wash over me. I want my house back, the house I paid for. And I want them to understand. They can't treat me like this anymore. I want them to face real consequences for once. Elijah nodded and immediately began typing on his computer. I'm filing an emergency injunction right now to prevent them from making any modifications to the property. Then we'll proceed with comprehensive legal action to void the fraudulent transfer. They'll be served with court papers by tomorrow morning at the latest. As I left his office, I felt an unexpected lightness in my chest. For the first time since the birthday party disaster, I wasn't fighting back tears or shaking with anxiety. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm determination flooding through me. I drove to the care facility for my afternoon shift, and halfway through helping Mr. Jenkins with his physical therapy, my phone exploded with notifications. Nathan had called 11 times and left 3 voicemails. My mother had called 17 times. Stephen had called 9. There were dozens of text messages ranging from furious accusations to panicked pleas. The final text from Nathan made me smile despite myself. What the hell have you done? Call me back right now. I silenced my phone completely and focused on my residents who genuinely needed me. Let my family panic for a while. Let them experience even a fraction of the gut-wrenching anxiety they'd so callously inflicted on me. Tomorrow they would discover exactly what happens when you push the accommodating daughter beyond her breaking point. Scene change, the confrontation. The following morning, absolute chaos erupted in my typically peaceful life. I was preparing for my shift, laying out my scrubs, when Vanessa called breathlessly to tell me my mother and Nathan were causing a dramatic scene outside my apartment building. Peering cautiously through my blinds, I confirmed her warning. Nathan stalked back and forth like a caged animal while my mother pounded frantically on the building's entrance door. You have to stop this madness immediately, my mother shouted when I finally emerged from the building, her voice cracking with desperation. This ridiculous legal action will completely destroy our family. That's incredibly rich coming from you, I replied with surprising composure, feeling oddly detached from the situation. You weren't concerned about destroying the family when you stole my entire life savings, were you? Nathan stepped aggressively toward me, his face flushed with rage. You're being absolutely insane. I have a baby coming in 3 months. What were you planning to do with that house anyway? Live there all alone with your pathetic little plants and no real family? Actually, I said calmly, pulling out my phone and opening my Photos app. I have comprehensive proof of our original agreement right here. Would you like to see the explicit letter from your own attorney warning you this transfer was illegal? Or should we discuss the documents where someone clearly forged my signature? The handwriting analysis expert has already confirmed it wasn't me. The color drained dramatically from both their faces. My mother grabbed my arm. With surprising force, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Sweetheart, please, we can work this out between us as a family. There's absolutely no need for lawyers and courts to get involved in a simple misunderstanding. I deliberately removed her hand from my arm. We ceased being a functional family. The moment you decided my life savings meant nothing compared to Nathan's wants. The district attorney's office now has copies of every relevant document. So unless you want this situation to escalate further, I strongly suggest you contact your lawyer immediately about reversing the fraudulent deed transfer. You would actually send your own mother to jail, she gasped. Tears immediately welling in her eyes, the same calculated tears that had manipulated me countless times throughout my life. No, Mom. You might send yourself to jail through your own actions. I'm simply standing up for myself after a lifetime of being taken advantage of. Nathan started to launch into what would undoubtedly be another self-righteous tirade. But his phone rang loudly, interrupting him. It was Amber. I could clearly hear her panicked voice through the speaker as she frantically informed him that police officers were currently at their actual home with formal questions about the suspicious deed transfer. They departed in a rush after that, hurrying to deal with the rapidly unfolding disaster of their own making. Vanessa, who had been watching vigilantly from her car to ensure my safety, hurried over and embraced me tightly. I've never seen you stand up to them so firmly before, she said, genuine pride evident in her voice. You were absolutely magnificent. I've never had concrete proof of their manipulation before, I replied, feeling a strange combination of sadness and empowerment. It was always just my word against theirs, and somehow I always ended up doubting myself. But this time, I have everything thoroughly documented. Later that afternoon, Elijah called to inform me that Nathan and my parents' attorney had reached out urgently. They wanted to settle immediately. Not only would they transfer the house back to me, but they also offered to cover all my legal expenses plus substantial additional damages. The very real threat of criminal charges had finally forced them to recognize I wasn't backing down this time. Should we accept their settlement offer? Elijah asked professionally. Yes, I said without hesitation. But I want them to sign something additional, a notarized statement explicitly acknowledging exactly what they attempted to do. They don't get to pretend this never happened or rewrite the narrative later. 2 weeks later, I sat composed and professional in Elijah's conference room as my mother, Stephen, and Nathan signed the settlement papers. The deed was officially returning to my name, along with a substantial settlement that included complete coverage of my legal fees plus an additional $50,000 in punitive damages. But the most important document on the table was the one they least wanted to sign, a detailed, notarized statement acknowledging their deliberate attempt to defraud me. My mother couldn't control her tears, continuously dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, while Stephen stared fixedly at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Nathan looked like he'd aged a decade virtually overnight, his characteristic smugness replaced by a tightly clenched jaw and dark circles under his eyes. His wife Amber had apparently moved out after discovering he'd been secretly hiding their considerable financial problems from her. Apparently, the attempted house theft was merely the visible tip of a massive iceberg of deception. I need all parties to sign here on the final page, the notary stated formally, indicating the signature line with her pen. One by one, they signed the documents. When it was finally my turn, I noticed with satisfaction that my hand was perfectly steady. I sincerely hope you're satisfied with yourself, Nathan muttered bitterly as he stood to leave. You've systematically destroyed everything. No, I replied with remarkable composure, meeting his gaze directly. You ruined everything when you all decided to steal what I had worked years to earn. I simply restored justice to the situation. They filed silently out of the conference room, my mother making one last desperate attempt to catch my eye with a tearful glance. I deliberately turned away. The era of emotional manipulation and guilt trips was definitively over. Elijah handed me the new deed with a triumphant smile. Congratulations, Olivia. The house is officially yours again, exactly as it should have been all along. But I had one final surprise that no one expected. Actually, I said confidently, removing another set of documents from my bag. I've decided to sell the property immediately. My family had already begun spreading a revisionist version of events about their unfortunate misunderstanding regarding the house, desperately attempting to save face with relatives and friends. They remained completely unaware that I'd received an extremely attractive offer from a developer who planned to convert the property into modern townhouses. The offer substantially exceeded market value by nearly 20%. They're going to be absolutely livid when they find out about your plans, Vanessa remarked later as we sipped our specialty lattes at our favorite local cafe. They clearly expected you to allow them to continue living there despite everything. That's precisely why selling is the only logical choice, I replied, feeling a profound sense of liberation. They need to understand conclusively that they have absolutely no control over me or my decisions anymore. The next day, I signed the final papers to sell the house. The developer was ecstatic. My real estate agent was thrilled with her commission, and I was finally, truly free. The substantial profit from the sale, combined with my settlement money, meant I could buy my dream townhouse, one with a spacious balcony garden, while still having a solid financial cushion for the future. As I drove away from the closing, my phone buzzed with yet another voicemail notification from my mother. She was sobbing uncontrollably, saying she just heard about the impending sale, begging me desperately to call her back immediately. I deleted the message before it even finished playing. Some people might consider my actions unnecessarily harsh, but I recognize them for what they truly are, healthy boundaries. For the first time in my entire life, I refused to sacrifice my own well-being to solve problems others had created. Let them figure out their own solutions for once. I had a beautiful new home to furnish and a balcony garden to plant. The weeks following the house sale were absolutely transformative for me. I discovered a beautiful townhouse in a quiet neighborhood with an expansive balcony that offered plenty of space for the container garden I'd always fantasized about creating. Vanessa enthusiastically helped me move in, and together we painted the walls in soothing, tranquil shades, nothing remotely like the bold, dramatic color schemes my mother had always insisted were the only proper choice for a respectable home. My phone continued lighting up regularly with messages from various family members. Some were openly hostile, calling me selfish and heartless for selling the house without giving my mother and Stephen a chance to work something out. Others attempted emotional manipulation, telling me my mother was so devastated she cried herself to sleep every night and barely ate. My Aunt Gloria was the only family member who steadfastly supported me, directly telling the others they should be deeply ashamed of their behavior. I bumped into your mother at Whole Foods yesterday, Gloria told me over mimosas during our Sunday brunch. She was dramatically telling anyone who would listen about how ungrateful and cruel you've become, but most people in town know the real story now. That notarized statement acknowledging their fraud has been shared widely. Your mother's reputation is in tatters. I couldn't help smiling, thinking about how completely the narrative had shifted. No longer was I viewed as the difficult daughter who refused to help her struggling brother. Now I was the hardworking care professional whose own family had conspired to steal her life savings. My mother's desperate attempts to portray herself as the victim were falling completely flat. Nathan and Amber formally separated, and he moved back in with our parents. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned he was now working as a sales associate at an electronics store, his first steady paycheck job in nearly a decade. Occasionally, I drove past their modest rental house on my way to the care facility, a basic duplex that bore no resemblance to the beautiful home they had attempted to steal from me. I took no pleasure in seeing them struggle financially, but I did feel a profound sense of justice being served at last. My own life improved dramatically once I stopped allowing my family to drain my emotional energy and financial resources. I applied for and secured a promotion to senior care coordinator at Sunrise, which came with significantly better hours and a substantial salary increase. My colleagues quickly noticed the transformation in me. I smiled genuinely more often, confidently advocated for myself in staff meetings, and no longer automatically volunteered for all the holiday shifts simply because others had real families to spend time with, while I supposedly didn't. One peaceful evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset and mapping out my container garden, my mother's name lit up my phone screen. Instead of the familiar knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach, I felt nothing but calm detachment as I declined the call. Later, I briefly listened to her voicemail. She was asking if I could help Nathan with his portion of their rent since things are so terribly difficult for him right now. I deleted the message without a second thought and returned to browsing my gardening catalog. I had already ordered seedlings for cherry tomatoes, bell peppers, and my beloved lavender plants. The planter boxes were prepared, the soil enriched and waiting to nurture new growth. In many ways, it felt like the perfect metaphor for my own life. I had finally cleared away the suffocating weeds of toxic relationships and was ready to cultivate something beautiful and nourishing for myself. Vanessa frequently joked that I should publish a self-help book titled How to Stop Being Everyone's Emotional ATM in 3 Difficult Steps. Perhaps she was right. All it took was losing my entire life savings, taking legal action against my own family, and finally prioritizing my own well-being. Simple, right? 6 months after selling the house, my life had settled into a peaceful, fulfilling rhythm. My balcony garden was flourishing spectacularly, with cherry tomatoes ripening in clusters, and lavender releasing its soothing fragrance with every gentle breeze. I'd made real friends with several neighbors in my building, joined a progressive book club that met monthly at the local independent bookstore, and even started dating again, something I'd put off for years due to my family constantly draining my time, energy, and resources. The family drama hadn't completely vanished, but I'd developed effective strategies to manage it. My mother still attempted to contact me regularly, particularly when they faced financial difficulties. Each time, I maintained my boundaries with calm conviction. I'm not in a position to provide financial assistance, I would say firmly, regardless of how many tears or guilt trips followed. Those 8 words became my protective shield against their continued attempts at manipulation. Nathan's situation deteriorated significantly. Amber filed for divorce and secured primary custody of their infant son, my nephew, who I'd never even met. She discovered Nathan had secretly opened multiple credit cards in her name, leaving her with staggering debt. When she reached out to me for guidance, I connected her with Elijah, who helped her navigate the complicated legal mess. It felt genuinely rewarding to assist someone who truly deserved support. One Sunday morning, while I was tending to my thriving herb plants, a familiar car pulled into the visitor parking area below my balcony. My mother emerged, looking noticeably older and more haggard than I remembered. She had arrived unannounced, undoubtedly hoping to catch me off guard and vulnerable. "Your garden is absolutely beautiful," she remarked softly, standing awkwardly by my front door. "You always did have a special touch with plants. Remember how you used to help me with my roses?" "Thank you," I replied evenly, continuing to carefully prune my basil. But you really shouldn't show up without calling first. My boundaries haven't changed. I know. I miss you terribly, sweetheart, and I needed to tell you in person that Stephen and I are being forced to sell our rental house. We simply can't afford it anymore. Especially with Nathan's ongoing financial issues, she trailed off. Her eyes filled with unmistakable hopeful expectation. I stood up, brushing potting soil from my hands. Mom, I'm not giving you money. That chapter of our relationship is permanently closed. I wasn't asking for it, she began, then stopped herself mid-sentence. Okay, maybe I was hoping you might help, but can you honestly blame me? You're clearly doing so well now, and we're still your family despite everything. Family doesn't deliberately steal from family, I stated firmly. Family doesn't forge signatures on legal documents or justify theft because one child supposedly deserves it more than another. You made your choices, Mom. Now you're experiencing the natural consequences of those choices. She left in tears, but I felt no guilt whatsoever. Instead, I felt genuine pride in maintaining my hard-won boundaries. Later that evening, I hosted an intimate dinner party for Vanessa, Gloria, and several colleagues from Sunrise. As we sat on my balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights twinkle below, I had a profound realization: this gathering was what family truly looks like. It wasn't about DNA or obligation, it was built on choice, mutual respect, and genuine care for one another. To establish healthy boundaries, Vanessa toasted, raising her glass with a knowing smile. To personal growth and new beginnings, I added, contemplating my flourishing garden and my even more flourishing sense of self-worth. A full year has now passed since I stood up to my family, and the profound transformation in my life continues to astonish me. My townhouse has become a peaceful sanctuary filled with warmth and tranquility I never experienced in my family's presence. My container garden produced such an abundance of vegetables last summer that I began donating the excess to the community food pantry, where some of our care facility residents volunteer. I occasionally reflect on how my mother used to mockingly dismiss my ridiculous obsession with gardening, calling it a complete waste of valuable time. Now my garden brings me immeasurable joy while also helping others in our community. My professional life has flourished without the constant disruption of family emergencies. I was recently promoted to Regional Care Coordinator for 3 facilities. And my colleagues frequently comment on how much more confident and assertive I've become. I no longer apologize profusely for using my vacation days or for declining extra shifts when I need personal time. Establishing boundaries with my family taught me to establish healthy boundaries in every area of my life. Vanessa jokes that I'm developing something of a reputation at Sunrise and our sister facilities. Newer care workers often seek me out for advice, not just about resident care protocols, but about advocating for themselves in challenging situations. Last week, a young care assistant tearfully thanked me for inspiring her to leave her financially abusive partner. If you could stand up to your entire family after a lifetime of manipulation, she told me, I realized I could certainly stand up to one controlling boyfriend. My mother, Stephen, and Nathan continue to struggle financially, but that's no longer my burden to carry. They made their choices, just as I made mine. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for people, and yourself, is to allow them to experience the natural consequences of their actions rather than repeatedly rescuing them. This journey was never about revenge, it was about personal growth and reclaiming my self-respect. The money they attempted to steal represented just financial resources, but what I gained by standing up to them was truly priceless: my freedom, my self-worth, and my ability to define my own boundaries. Recently, I found an old photo of my family from my mother's birthday party, taken just before everything fell apart. Looking at their smug, entitled expressions, I realized I no longer feel anger toward them. Instead, I feel a strange sense of gratitude. Their betrayal ultimately forced me to become someone stronger, someone who values herself enough to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they're disguised as family obligations. My balcony garden is blooming again this spring, more vibrant than ever before. Gloria visits frequently, sometimes bringing her grandchildren, who love helping me plant new flowers and herbs. Vanessa and I maintain our weekly coffee dates, where we often laugh about how dramatically I've changed from the person who used to drop everything to answer every demanding call from my family. Even Amber brings my nephew over occasionally. She says the peaceful environment of my home and garden has a healing effect on both of them after all they've endured. Life isn't perfect by any means, but it's authentically mine now. I've learned that sometimes the most powerful form of reclaiming your life isn't about seeking revenge, it's about creating a life so fulfilling that the past loses its power over you. Every plant that thrives in my garden, every peaceful evening on my balcony, every boundary I maintain serves as a tangible reminder that I finally chose myself. And I would do it all over again without a second thought. I'm standing frozen in the middle of Dallas International Airport. My overpacked suitcase tilted awkwardly beside me as the devastating truth slowly sinks in. My mom's sweet voice comes over the phone, and every word makes my stomach feel all knotted up. We're in Aspen, darling. The mountains are absolutely gorgeous. Why didn't you come to the airport yesterday, sweetie? My heart pounds against my ribs as the awful truth crashes over me. They had deliberately lied about our flight date. The shock feels like ice water in my veins. My name is Elise Mercer, and I never imagined my own parents would stoop this low. I'd been looking forward to this family ski trip for months, desperately needing a break after an exhausting quarter as a senior executive at my digital marketing firm. I had just finished hosting important clients from Tokyo and Berlin, my nerves frayed from the pressure of securing multi-million-dollar contracts. This trip was supposed to be my reward, a chance to breathe mountain air, relax with hot cocoa by a fire, and reconnect with my family. What do you mean yesterday? I managed to say, my voice trembling so badly I have to grip the handle of my suitcase for support. You told me the flight was today at 2 p.m. I have the text messages right here on my phone to prove it. The bustling airport suddenly feels suffocating as other travelers rush past me, their faces bright with excitement for their winter adventures, each happy family only highlighting my growing sense of betrayal. A little girl skips by, holding her dad's hand, and the sight sends a sharp pain through my chest. Oh sweetie, there must have been some confusion, my mom replies with a practiced softness. But I can hear the deliberate lie beneath her words. Your sister made it just fine. We're all settled in at the resort now. The hot tubs are divine. And Natalie is already booking her first skiing lesson. Of course my sister made it. Natalie was always their priority. Their golden child with her perfect smile and carefree attitude. I should have known something was off when they insisted on handling all the flight arrangements themselves, claiming it would be easier that way. The same parents who relied on me to help pay their bills somehow couldn't trust me to book my own ticket to join them. This wasn't a confusion, Mom, I say, my voice growing stronger as white-hot anger begins to replace the initial shock. You deliberately gave me the wrong date. You never wanted me on this trip, did you? Just my money. The silence on the other end stretches for what feels like minutes before she responds. Now Elise, don't be dramatic. These things happen in families. You work so hard. We thought maybe you'd appreciate the extra day to prepare. I end the call with a sharp tap, my hand shaking uncontrollably. Around me, families embrace as they prepare for their own vacations, a dad lifting his son onto his shoulders, a couple taking selfies with their boarding passes. Meanwhile, I stand alone, betrayed by the people who should have loved me most. The bitter irony burns in my throat. I'd been sending them money every month, for the past 2 years, helping them maintain their comfortable lifestyle after my dad's early retirement. They depended on my money for everything, like Howard's medication and Vivian's weekly hair appointments. Yet, they still decided to leave me out of our family trip. Looking at my now useless suitcase filled with ski clothes I wouldn't need, I feel hot tears threatening to spill over. But more than sadness, I feel a fire of anger igniting inside me, spreading through my chest and into my limbs. This isn't just about a missed vacation, it's about years of manipulation, favoritism, and treating me like an ATM with a pulse. Standing there amid the holiday travelers, I make a decision that will change everything in our family dynamic forever. I've always wondered if my parents ever truly saw me as their daughter, or just as their personal bank account with convenient access. Growing up in our suburban home, everything revolved around Natalie, her dance competitions, her straight A's that came effortlessly, her infectious laugh that charmed everyone. I learned to exist in her shadow, always the responsible one. But I never stopped desperately trying to earn my parents' love and approval through achievement and responsibility. After graduating with honors in marketing and psychology, I threw myself into my career. With relentless determination, working overtime and sacrificing weekends to climb the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, Natalie pursued her dreams of becoming an actress, her attempts generously funded by our parents' dwindling retirement savings. I was building something tangible and real, something with security. Within 5 years, I had earned my position as the youngest executive at my digital marketing firm, managing global client accounts and leading a team of 15 talented professionals. That's when my dad, Howard, decided to retire early at 60 due to his worsening arthritis. Their savings had been severely depleted from supporting Natalie's struggling acting career. And suddenly they were calling me weekly, voices strained with worry about making ends meet. Without a second thought, I stepped in to help. Every month, I transferred $2,000 to cover their mortgage and utilities. When unexpected medical bills appeared for Dad's high blood pressure medication, I covered those too. Last year alone, I gave them over $30,000, money I had diligently saved for a down payment on my own house in a neighborhood I'd been dreaming about. "We're so blessed to have such a generous daughter," my mom would say during our weekly calls, her voice dripping with practiced gratitude. But those calls invariably ended the same way, with detailed updates about Natalie's latest audition or her new professional headshots that I had unknowingly financed. They rarely asked about my recent promotion or the stress of managing international clients unless they needed something. 2 months ago, when they mentioned planning a family trip to Aspen's exclusive Snowmass resort, I was genuinely thrilled, finally. A chance to spend quality time together where I wouldn't just be the financial provider, but a valued family member. They insisted on handling all the arrangements since Dad claimed he had accumulated airline miles to use. "Don't worry about anything," they said, voices warm with reassurance. "Just focus on your big client presentation with those Japanese executives. We'll take care of all the details." Like a fool desperate for family connection, I believed them completely. I even transferred an extra $3,000 to their account to help cover the resort expenses, wincing at the hit to my savings but convincing myself it was worth it. "It's the least I can do," I told them, imagining us all sipping hot chocolate after a day on the slopes, laughing together as we watched the sunset paint the mountains pink. I thought maybe this trip would finally be different, that they would see me as more than just their financial safety net with convenient 24/7 access. Instead, here I stood in a crowded airport surrounded by holiday travelers, with a packed suitcase full of new ski clothes and a heart that felt like it was being crushed under an avalanche of betrayal. My phone buzzes with a new notification, an Instagram alert from Natalie. With trembling fingers, I open it to find a photo of her and our parents on a ski lift. Designer sunglasses gleaming in the mountain sun, colorful cocktails raised in a toast. The caption reads, "Family vacation begins. First day on the slopes was amazing. Missing you, sis. Wish you could have made it. Hashtag family time, hashtag Aspen luxury." The rage that floods through me in that moment is unlike anything I've ever experienced, a white-hot current that seems to electrify every cell in my body. Standing there in the terminal, staring at Natalie's carefully filtered photo, something inside me finally shatters completely. With shaking hands, I start scrolling through past text messages from my parents. And the pattern becomes crystal clear, every single conversation about the trip had been meticulously orchestrated to ensure I'd miss it. She texted me 3 times to remind me that the flight is at 2 p.m. on the 15th. But looking at Natalie's Instagram story, I can see their boarding passes from yesterday, the 14th, prominently displayed as she had documented their entire journey. They hadn't made a simple mistake. They had planned this cruel deception down to the last detail while happily accepting my financial contribution. My phone rings again, the screen lighting up with my dad's name and photo. I answer with my jaw clenched so tight it hurts. "Elise," he starts, his voice stern as if I were still a disobedient 12-year-old being scolded for staying out too late. "Your mom is very upset by your attitude on the phone earlier. We made an honest scheduling mistake with the dates, and you're turning this into unnecessary drama. You're a grown professional woman. You should understand these things happen in family planning." I laugh, but it comes out as a harsh, broken sound that turns heads in the terminal. An honest mistake? Then why did Natalie know the correct date? Why did you insist on booking everything yourselves after I offered to help? Why have you been deliberately lying to me for weeks while taking my money? "Now listen here, young lady," he begins, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he always used when he was about to shut down any questioning of his decisions. "No, Dad, for once you listen," I interrupt, my voice louder than intended. "I just checked my bank statements right here on my phone. Last week I sent you $3,000 specifically for this trip. Was that a mistake too? Or did you just take my money knowing full well you'd leave me behind while you all enjoyed the luxury resort I helped pay for?" The extended silence that follows tells me everything I need to know. I can almost see him exchanging glances with my mom, trying to formulate their next manipulation. "Elise," he finally says, his voice softening now, trying a different tactical approach. "You know we're on a fixed income since my retirement. We could really use that money for our trip expenses. You're doing great at work with that big promotion. You get that family has to make sacrifices sometimes, right? That's what good daughters do." My hands are shaking so violently I can barely hold the phone as tears of fury burn in my eyes. Sacrifices for family? Are you serious right now? I've been making nothing but sacrifices for years. I've given up my savings, my dreams of buying my own place in the city, my vacations, everything to support you and Mom and indirectly Natalie too. And this is how you repay my loyalty? Don't be selfish, he snaps, dropping the gentle act instantly. Your sister needed this vacation badly. She's been under tremendous stress with her acting career and auditions. You know how sensitive she is. Her acting career? I interrupt, my voice rising as people nearby glance in my direction. You mean the hobby you've been funding with MY money while she lives rent-free in your house? The auditions that never lead anywhere while I work 60-hour weeks managing international clients to support all of you? That's enough, he shouts, abandoning all pretense of reasonableness. I won't stand for this disrespect from my own daughter. You've changed, Elise. Success and money have made you cruel and entitled. In that moment, something fundamental shifts inside me. The hurt is still there, throbbing like an open wound, but now it's hardening into steel-like resolve. You're right about one thing, Dad. I have changed. And things between us are about to change even more dramatically. I end the call with a decisive tap and open my banking app, my fingers steady. with newfound determination. It's time to permanently close the bank of Elise and reclaim my life. The drive home from the airport is a blur of white-hot anger and steely determination. My hands grip the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turn white. And I barely register the familiar streets passing by. Once home, I spend the entire evening methodically documenting everything, screenshots of contradictory text messages about flight dates, records of bank transfers spanning years, and a detailed spreadsheet tracking every dollar I'd given them. I create separate folders on my laptop, organizing the evidence with the precision I usually reserve for client presentations. The total at the bottom of my spreadsheet makes my stomach lurch: $47,800. Almost $50,000. That's the price tag my parents had placed on their conditional love. Seeing that number in black and white sends a wave of nausea through me. That has nothing to do with the glass of wine sitting untouched beside my laptop. The next morning, I skip my usual workout and arrive at my local bank branch. The moment they open, wearing my power suit like armor. I need to close a joint account immediately, I tell the personal banker. My voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. And I want to make sure no further automatic transfers can be processed from any of my accounts. The banker looks at me with understanding eyes as I explain the situation in clinical terms. As I sign forms and respond to security questions, I feel like I'm getting lighter. As if invisible chains are falling away from my body and mind. Before I leave, I set up a new account at a different bank that my parents have no idea exists. As soon as I'm in my office, I reach out to HR on the phone. I need to update my life insurance beneficiaries, I tell them, surprised by how calm I sound. Yes, it's urgent. Today, if possible. By noon, I've removed my parents from every financial connection in my life. I've changed passwords, security questions, and contact information. I've frozen my credit and set up alerts for any new accounts or inquiries. The methodical process of untangling myself from them feels both terrifying and liberating. That's when the digital bombardment begins. My phone starts buzzing nonstop with notifications. Each one more desperate than the last. First come the guilt-laden messages from my mom. Elise, I haven't slept all night knowing you're upset with us. This misunderstanding is tearing our family apart. How could you be so heartless toward the people who raised you and sacrificed everything for your success? Then Natalie joins the assault, her texts punctuated with angry emojis. Oh my God, you're being so incredibly dramatic about this. It was just a stupid miscommunication. About dates. Mom's literally crying every day because of you. She can barely eat. And Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Is that what you wanted? But it's my dad's message that truly reveals their colors. His words stripped of any pretense of parental love. We raised you better than this, Elise. After everything we've done for you, all the opportunities we provided, this is how you repay our lifetime of sacrifice? Your mom needs her blood pressure medication refilled this week, $378 that we don't have. Because you're throwing a tantrum. Don't you dare abandon your responsibilities to this family. I didn't raise my daughter to be selfish. I stare at my phone, a strange calm settling over me as I recognize the manipulation tactics that once would have sent me spiraling into guilt and compliance. My responsibilities to the family? What about their fundamental responsibility to treat me with basic human respect and honesty? Instead of responding to their barrage of texts, I draft a clear, firm email. My marketing executive skills serving me well as I choose each word carefully. Dear Mom, Dad, and Natalie. I've done a lot of thinking since yesterday's airport incident. What happened wasn't a simple miscommunication, it was a deliberate choice to exclude me from a family vacation while still taking my money to fund it. After careful review of our interactions over the past several years, I've identified a pattern of behavior that ends now. From this moment on, I am cutting off all financial support. The money I've provided was always a choice made out of love, not an obligation. Or a right you're entitled to. You'll need to find another way to cover your expenses going forward. Please do not contact me about money again under any circumstances. I need time and space to reevaluate our relationship and what it means to be family. Elise. Within minutes of hitting send, my phone explodes with incoming calls, voicemails, and frantic texts. My mom leaves 3 back-to-back sobbing voicemails about how they'll lose the house without my support. Natalie sends a stream of angry messages calling me selfish, cruel, and heartless. My dad's texts grow increasingly threatening, warning me about vague consequences if I don't come to my senses immediately. After reading each message, I take a deep breath and block their numbers one by one. The sudden digital silence feels both terrifying and peaceful. That evening, sitting alone in my apartment with a glass of wine I can barely taste, doubt begins to creep in around the edges of my resolve. Years of conditioning had taught me to put their needs above my own, to believe I was selfish and unloving for having any boundaries at all. The weight of family obligation presses down on me, threatening to suffocate my newfound courage. But then I remember standing in that airport, the cold realization washing over me that they had carefully planned and executed their betrayal while happily spending my money. I remember the $47,800 spreadsheet total. I remember the look on my dad's face. In our last family photo, not pride in his successful daughter, but calculation. I pick up my phone and delete all their messages without reading them again. Some wounds need clean breaks to heal properly. The next day at work, I'm reviewing client metrics when my assistant knocks on my door. "There's a Diana Bennett here to see you," she says. "She says she's your aunt. Should I send her in?" My heart jumps into my throat. Diana is my dad's older sister, and I've always looked up to her for being so independent and running her own boutique hotel successfully. We've never been extremely close, but there's always been a mutual respect between us. "Yes, please," I say, quickly closing my laptop and smoothing my hair. Diana walks in looking elegant as always in her tailored blazer, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. There's concern in her eyes as she sits down across from me. "I heard what happened," she says, her voice gentle but direct. "Howard and Vivian asked me to talk some sense into you." Their words, not mine. I brace myself for more guilt trips and manipulation, my defenses automatically rising. "What they did was cruel, Elise," Diana continues, surprising me completely. "I've watched them take advantage of your kindness and generosity for years, and I've said nothing. That's on me, and I'm sorry. It's time someone in this family told you the truth. You deserve so much better than this treatment." Unexpected tears well up in my eyes, blurring my vision of her sympathetic face. Diana reaches across my desk and squeezes my hand firmly. Finally, someone in my family really sees me and the position I've been put in. "They'll try everything to pull you back into their web," Diana warns, her eyes serious. Tears, health scares, financial catastrophes, guilt trips about family loyalty. "Stay strong. You're doing the right thing, even though it feels terrible right now." Her validation is like cool water on a burn I didn't fully realize was still scorching me from the inside. 2 weeks after sending that email, I discovered something that makes the Aspen incident seem almost trivial by comparison. Diana calls during my lunch break, her normally composed voice tight with barely contained anger. "Elise, I need to show you something important. Can you come to my hotel after work today? It can't wait, and it shouldn't be discussed over the phone." When I arrive at Diana's boutique hotel, the concierge immediately escorts me to her private office. She has her laptop open and several documents spread across her glass desk, her expression grim. "Howard came to me last week asking for a significant loan," she begins without preamble. "He let slip some things that didn't add up with what I know about their finances. So I did some digging. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I was worried. What she shows me makes my blood run cold: digital bank statements, loan applications, and credit card bills paint a disturbing picture, far worse than I'd imagined. My parents hadn't just been using my money for basic living expenses. They'd been living far beyond their means, counting on my regular support to cover an increasingly extravagant lifestyle while presenting themselves as struggling retirees. "Look at this," Diana says, pointing to a credit card statement on her screen. "They took out a new premium card in your name just 3 months ago. Have you checked your credit report recently?" My hands shake so badly I can barely operate my phone as I download a credit monitoring app and log in. There it is in stark digital reality, a $15,000 balance on a platinum credit card I never applied for. They had used my social security number and personal information to open it fraudulently. "That's identity theft," Diana says quietly, letting the words hang in the air between us. "It's a federal crime, Elise, not just a family disagreement." I feel like someone is sitting on my chest as I struggle to breathe. How could they possibly justify doing this to their own daughter? "There's more," Diana continues, her face reflecting genuine pain at having to be the bearer of such news. "Remember that elaborate story about Natalie's promising acting career in Los Angeles? She's not even in California for those supposed auditions. She's been living at home this whole time, working part-time at a coffee shop down the street from your parents' house. The money they claimed was for her headshots, acting classes, and rent? Based on these statements, they've been using a substantial portion of it to fund your dad's escalating gambling habit." The room feels like it's spinning as everything starts to make sense. In a really unsettling way, the non-stop demands for cash, the confusing answers, and the guilt trips every time I wanted more information. It wasn't just emotional games, it was a well-organized fraud. My phone buzzes with a text from my mom: "Please, sweetie, we need to talk immediately. Your dad's having serious chest pains from all this unnecessary stress. His blood pressure is dangerously high. If anything happens to him, I don't know how you'll live with yourself." I wordlessly show Diana the message. She shakes her head in disgust. More manipulation, right on cue. They're desperate because their house of cards is collapsing without your financial support. What should I do? I ask, feeling simultaneously numb and overwhelmed by the magnitude of their betrayal. "You have 2 choices," Diana says, her voice steady and practical. "You can press formal charges for the identity theft, which would likely result in criminal consequences, or you can handle this privately with legal assistance. But either way, you need to protect yourself immediately. This isn't just about money anymore. I think about years of sacrifice, of putting their needs before mine, of believing their lies, the chest pains, the tears, the guilt trips about family obligation. It was all part of a calculated long-term game where I was both player and prize. I want to confront them one last time," I say, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Face to face. But I need you there with me as a witness and support." Diana nods firmly. "I'll set it up. But first, we need to gather all the evidence. Document everything, and freeze your credit completely. They've shown you exactly who they really are, Elise. It's time to believe them." That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I toss and turn in my bed, staring at the ceiling, as my mind races through all the dreams I'd reluctantly put on hold to support them: the beautiful brownstone in the city I'd been saving for, the international vacations I cancelled, the investment portfolio I should have built by now. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd stolen precious years of my life that I could never get back. The realization burns in my chest like acid. I get up at 3 a.m. and pace my living room, hugging myself against the chill that seems to come from within. My financial planner had once calculated that by 35, I should have had enough for a substantial down payment on my dream home. Instead, I had been funneling that money directly into my parents' fraudulent lifestyle. But as I stand by my window watching the city lights, something unexpected washes over me. For the first time in my adult life, I feel a startling clarity. The dense fog of manipulation that had clouded my judgment for years is finally lifting, and in its place is a steel-like resolve that straightens my spine. They wanted to play these sick psychological games? Fine. But this time I would be the one making the rules, and I would not be playing to lose. I spend the rest of the night drafting notes on my laptop, organizing my thoughts and strategy with the same precision I bring to major client presentations. By morning, my eyes are red from lack of sleep, but my mind is sharper than ever. The confrontation is set for Saturday afternoon via Zoom first, with Diana hosting from her hotel. I spent Friday morning with Caleb Winters, a financial crimes attorney Diana recommended, going through every detail of the identity theft case. His office is sleek and minimalist, much like his approach. "You have an exceptionally strong case," he tells me, his voice matter of fact. "The evidence of fraud is overwhelming. If this goes to court, they're looking at substantial penalties." Then I prepare a digital presentation with all the evidence, screenshots of the fraudulent credit card statements, chronological bank transfers spanning years, text message receipts, and a detailed accounting of every penny they've taken. I organize it all in a professional slide deck that would impress even my most demanding clients. This isn't just a family discussion, it's the most important presentation of my life. I rehearse what I'll say in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing until my voice no longer shakes. When I detail their betrayal, I will not cry. I will not falter. For once, I will be as calculating as they have been. The Zoom call begins at exactly 2 p.m. on Saturday. Diana sits beside me in her hotel office for support, while my parents and Natalie join from their living room. Natalie looks nothing like the carefree girl in those Aspen ski photos. Her face is drawn, eyes darting nervously as if she'd rather be anywhere else. They all stare at me through the screen with varying degrees of defiance and apprehension. "Thank you all for agreeing to this meeting," I begin, my voice steady and professional, as if addressing difficult clients. "I've discovered some things we need to discuss immediately." "Elise, sweetheart," my mom interrupts, tears already welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. "Before you say anything more, you need to know how much we love." "No," I cut her off firmly, feeling Diana's supportive presence beside me. "I'm talking now. You will listen." I share my screen and begin the presentation, starting with the credit card statements. Would anyone care to explain why there's a platinum credit card with a $15,000 balance in my name that I never applied for? The color drains from my dad's face as he recognizes the detailed statement. Natalie looks genuinely confused, while my mom jumps in quickly, her performer's instincts kicking in. "Listen, Elise, it was an emergency. Your dad's medication expenses went through the roof, and we were going to talk to you about it next week. We just needed a quick solution for now." "An emergency?" I clicked to the next slide showing their recent purchases. Like these first-class tickets to Las Vegas? Or the $3,200 spent at luxury retailers? Or perhaps this $5,000 withdrawal at the Bellagio casino was for medicine too? I continue methodically through the evidence, slide by slide. "And what about these large transfers labeled Natalie's acting workshops? And LA apartment deposit? Over $22,000 last year alone. For a career that apparently doesn't exist." Natalie's head snaps up, her eyes widening. "What do you mean, doesn't exist? What acting workshops?" I turn my attention to her, softening my tone slightly. "You really don't know, do you? They've been telling me for years that you're pursuing acting in Los Angeles. That you needed financial support for headshots, acting classes, apartment rent in California." "What?" Natalie looks at our parents in genuine shock, her voice cracking. "I've been working at Starbucks making minimum wage. They told me you refused to help with my community college tuition because you were too busy with your fancy executive lifestyle. The Zoom call erupts into chaos. Natalie starts crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. My mom frantically tries to talk over everyone, her hands fluttering dramatically. My dad stands up, his face contorted with rage, and leans toward the camera. "Enough of this nonsense," he shouts, pounding his fist on their coffee table. "We did what we had to do as parents. You privileged girls don't understand the pressures we're under." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I say, my voice cold as I share the final slide, the legal definition of identity theft highlighted in bold red text. You committed identity theft and fraud. That's a federal crime punishable by up to 30 years in prison. I have two choices here: press criminal charges immediately or handle this privately with a legal repayment agreement. Your decision. My mom collapses into theatrical sobs that would impress a Broadway director. "You wouldn't do that to us. We're your parents. This will destroy our reputation in the community." "Parents don't steal from their children," Diana interjects sharply, speaking for the first time. "Parents don't lie and manipulate and commit federal fraud against their own daughter." Just then, my dad clutches his chest dramatically and staggers backward, knocking into their side table. "My heart," he gasps with a grimace of pain. "Call an ambulance." "Vivian, my medication." For a split second, my old instincts kick in: concern, fear, the urge to help. But then I notice my mom's face reflected clearly in their hallway mirror, not panic or concern, but calculation in her eyes as she watches for my reaction. This is their final desperate play, trying to seize control again by instilling fear. "No," I say firmly, crossing my arms. "No more manipulation tactics. Here's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to meet in person tomorrow at Diana's hotel, with my attorney present. You're going to sign a legally binding repayment agreement for every penny you stole. You're going to close that fraudulent credit card immediately. And then you're going to leave me alone indefinitely. And if we refuse this outrageous demand," my dad asks, his voice suddenly strong again. The heart attack symptoms mysteriously vanished. "Then I'll press formal charges first thing Monday morning. And you can explain your sophisticated fraud operation to a federal judge. I've already filed a police report as advised by my attorney. It's your choice." The silence that follows is absolute. Finally, my dad nods curtly, defeated. My mom stares at the camera, her tears suddenly dry. And Natalie looks at me through the screen with a mixture of shock and dawning realization, as if seeing our family dynamics clearly for the first time in her life. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I say, ending the meeting. Don't be late." The next day, as they sign the detailed repayment agreement Caleb had prepared, I feel no satisfaction or triumph, only a deep, hollow sadness for the family I thought I had versus the reality sitting before me. In the weeks that follow our confrontation, my parents' carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbles completely. Without my financial support underpinning their lifestyle, they are forced to sell their house with its perfectly maintained lawn and move into a small apartment across town. The legally binding repayment agreement means most of their retirement income now goes toward paying back what they'd stolen from me. It isn't revenge, it's simply justice and consequences. Natalie moves into Diana's guest house temporarily while she figures out her next steps. She calls me one evening, her voice small and uncertain. "I had absolutely no idea what they were doing all these years, Elise," she says, emotion thick in her throat. "They told me such different stories about you, that you were cold and career-obsessed, that you didn't want to help with my education. All these years, they've been deliberately playing us against each other. I'm so incredibly sorry." Her genuine apology means something to me, but it can't instantly erase years of damage and misunderstanding between us. Still, it's a start, a fragile bridge being built over a canyon of deception. It wasn't your fault, I tell her, surprising myself with the realization that I mean it. They manipulated both of us. My parents make one final dramatic attempt to regain control. They show up at my office building unannounced on a Tuesday morning, causing a scene in the sleek corporate lobby just as clients are arriving for an important meeting. "We'll lose absolutely everything because of you," my mom wails loudly, mascara strategically streaking down her face as curious coworkers stare. "After all we've sacrificed for your success. Is this how you repay our lifetime of devotion?" I stand my ground, surrounded by concerned colleagues and security personnel, feeling strangely calm despite the public spectacle. "You already lost the only thing that truly mattered," I say quietly but firmly. "You lost me. That's the only real consequence here. And it was entirely your choice." Security escorts them from the building, and as I watch them leave, my mom still performing her distress for anyone watching, my dad's shoulders rigid with indignation, I feel nothing but a profound sense of peace washing over me. The crushing weight of guilt and obligation that had pressed down on me for years is finally gone. I am no longer their personal ATM, their emotional punching bag, or their victim. I turn and walk confidently into my meeting, leaving them and their manipulation tactics behind. After landing a major client that evening, I sat down with my laptop and arranged a solo trip to Napa Valley, a luxurious wellness retreat I've been eager to experience. As I confirm the reservation for a vineyard view suite, I smile at the irony of it all. They had deliberately excluded me from their family vacation, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given me something far more valuable than any ski trip, my freedom. 3 months later, I stand among the sun-drenched vineyards of Napa, watching the sunset paint the rolling hills in breathtaking shades of gold and amber. This isn't the family vacation I'd once naively imagined, but it's exactly what I need: time alone to rediscover myself without the constant drain of toxic expectations. My phone, blissfully quiet without the constant barrage of guilt-tripping messages, buzzes with a text from Diana. "They're finally moving out of the house this weekend," she writes. "Natalie's enrolled in community college with a scholarship I helped her find. She's asking about having coffee with you when you're back in town. No pressure." I take a deep breath of the wine-scented air and reply, "Tell her I'm open to meeting. Maybe next Thursday." The repayment plan is working, slowly but surely. My parents have sold most of their possessions, and every month a transfer appears in my account. Without fail, not because they're genuinely sorry, but because they have no choice. The fraud charges I've held in reserve would surface immediately if they missed a single payment. My mom still tries sending emotional manipulation emails through different accounts. "We're eating ramen noodles every night while you're enjoying wine country luxury. Is this what you wanted for the people who raised you?" I delete them without responding, their pathetic guilt trips having lost all power over me. At work, I've earned another substantial promotion and industry recognition. The emotional energy I used to waste managing my parents' constant crises and demands now fuels my creativity and career growth. I've even started seriously looking at real estate listings again. That dream of owning my own place finally feels within reach, after years of having it stolen from me. Standing among the beautiful vineyards with a glass of Cabernet in hand, I finally understand with perfect clarity, sometimes the healthiest endings don't involve forgiveness, reconciliation, or maintaining toxic family bonds. Sometimes they're about having the courage to walk away and choose yourself, even when it hurts. My parents had planned that Aspen trip to intentionally hurt me and make me feel excluded. But in their cruelty, they actually set me free to create a life that I can really love and take care of.
As evening settled over the affluent Cudahy neighborhood in Milwaukee, Chloe Smith found solace by her window, resting against a sleek, modern railing. With the autumn colors painting her garden, Chloe, at 33, cradled her gently swelling belly. 6 months into her pregnancy, each flutter from within brought a wave of peaceful joy, momentarily eclipsing the strained ties with her family. Closing her eyes, Chloe's mind wandered to an event that still lingered vividly, the grand celebration of her father Daniel's 64th birthday 4 years ago. Held at the opulent Williams family residence, the event was a gathering of Milwaukee's real estate moguls, with champagne flowing abundantly. During the party, Chloe's mother, Samantha, approached her in a glaring Chanel suit, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she commented on Chloe's simple black dress, bought from a department store, a choice that reflected Chloe's values over extravagance. "Yes, I like it," Chloe had responded calmly, despite Samantha's biting remark about her husband's modest income. At that moment, Chloe's sister Melody joined in, her tone laced with scorn. Dressed extravagantly and flaunting a genuine diamond necklace, Melody mocked Chloe's usual absence from family events, preferring her uncomplicated lifestyle. Melody held a high-paying role as sales director at their father's company, a position more about nepotism than merit, marked by grandiose socializing rather than real skill. At the party, Chloe overheard her father proudly tell a client that the future of Williams' real estate would be in Melody's hands, praising her supposed prowess. Chloe knew better, aware that Melody's abilities were superficial at best. When she greeted her father, his smile was stiff, and his birthday wishes to her were strained. As the evening wound down, Samantha pulled Chloe aside, her expression grave under her makeup. She bluntly informed Chloe that Melody would inherit the family business, and Chloe's differing life choices meant she had no say in the matter, a stark reminder of her family's disdain for her independence. Years later, upon visiting her parents to share news of her pregnancy, the old wounds were reopened. Samantha's reaction to Chloe's pregnancy was skeptical, doubting her ability to manage financially. Even as Chloe insisted they were prepared, Melody's sarcastic remarks about her simple lifestyle cut deep. However, it was her father's final, harsh directive not to pass the Williams surname to her child that solidified Chloe's resolve to distance herself from their toxic influence. From that day, Chloe minimized contact with her family. She didn't return calls or emails, choosing to shield both herself and her unborn child from further hurt. Despite the lingering sadness, Chloe's resolve was clear: to foster a nurturing environment for her child, free from the shadows of family expectations. Chloe Smith often felt a surge of anxiety when whispers about her family's business reached her ears. On the surface, the company managed by her parents and her sister Melody seemed prosperous. However, industry insiders often murmured about questionable transactions and murky financial practices. Chloe wasn't fully aware of the details yet, but she sensed that these rumors were just the beginning of a deeper, hidden truth. Amidst these troubling thoughts, Chloe was also reminded of her modest wedding, which her mother, Samantha, had criticized for tarnishing the Williams family's image. As Chloe stood by the window, the memories dispersed with the autumn breeze. "Are you feeling okay?" came the caring voice of her husband, Ethan, as he returned from another demanding day. Despite the pressures of his role as CEO of a real estate development company, Ethan always prioritized Chloe's well-being. "Yes, perfect," Chloe replied, smiling at him in her simple dress, free from lavish adornments, her lifestyle a stark contrast to her family's flamboyance. Suddenly, her smartphone rang, breaking the peaceful moment. The caller ID read "Mom," causing Chloe's expression to tense. After hesitating for a moment, she answered. Samantha's voice, always laced with arrogance, filled the room from the background noise of a high-end spa. "Chloe, I need to talk to you about your baby shower. Next Saturday, I've arranged a celebration at Lissandor at 8 o'clock. Be there," Samantha announced. Lissandor was one of Milwaukee's most prestigious French restaurants, known for its exorbitant prices and impeccable service. Chloe frowned involuntarily. Her family always prioritized appearances and public perception over genuine sentiment. "Mom, it doesn't have to be somewhere that fancy," Chloe tried to interject. "Nonsense," Samantha cut in sharply. "It's my first grandchild. It should be celebrated properly. Or, do you intend to stick to your usual modest ways?" Her mother's words carried the usual disdain for Chloe's choices, her marriage to Ethan, and her lifestyle. Shortly after the call, a message from Melody popped up on Chloe's messenger. "Chloe, make sure you come this time. Sadly, you always avoid us. Mom and Dad are really worried about you." Chloe stared at the screen, a bitter smile forming. Melody's words, seemingly caring, were laced with the same condescension that had always undermined Chloe's decision to live independently. Ethan, noticing her discomfort, gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. You don't need to listen to them," he reassured her. "No, I'll go," Chloe declared decisively. "I'm done running away. It might be time to settle everything." That night, alone in the study, Chloe flipped through an old album containing photos from 12 years ago. Those pictures captured the time when she left a major corporation to forge her own path, a decision her family had mocked. Her mother had declared she would be a disgrace to the family. But young Chloe in those photos looked determined, undeterred by the criticism. That bold choice led her to the greatest happiness of her life, meeting Ethan Smith, who was just starting out as the president of a small real estate company back then. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been hers, and it had brought her here, ready to face her family once more, on her own terms. Chloe was immediately captivated by Ethan's genuine sincerity, his relentless work ethic, and his principle of evaluating people based on their character rather than their appearance or social status. Her family, particularly her parents and sister Melody, did not support her decision to marry him. "What's the point of marrying someone from such a small real estate company?" Melody had derisively commented. But Chloe was content. She knew what truly mattered to her. Over the years, Ethan's diligent efforts paid off, and he rose to become the CEO of a prominent real estate development company. Despite his professional success, the couple chose to live a simple life, prioritizing true happiness over superficial appearances or wealth. One evening, as Chloe was reminiscing over old photos in the study, Ethan peeked in. "Can you come here? I have something to discuss," he said, his voice carrying a tone of resolve. Chloe bookmarked her place in the album and stood up, unaware that the night ahead would bring significant changes to her life. Lissandor Restaurant stood regally in Milwaukee's Gold Coast neighborhood. Its historic Art Deco facade, reminiscent of the 1950s golden era, sparkled under the night sky. Dressed in an elegant navy maternity dress, Chloe stepped out of the taxi and into the cool evening air, her attire merging seamlessly with the upscale ambience of the venue. The clock read 8 o'clock. "Take care," the taxi driver remarked, sensing the restaurant might not be to her usual tastes. Chloe offered a faint smile in return. Indeed, such opulence was far from her usual preference, but tonight was about confronting and perhaps resolving her familial disputes. As she pushed open the heavy brass doors, the soft glow from the chandeliers cast delicate shadows across the marble floor. Mason, the floor manager, greeted her with a polished smile. "Are you part of the Williams family party?" he inquired. "Yes, that's us," Chloe confirmed, her voice steady. "I'm sorry, but your party has already finished their meal," Mason informed her, his expression turning apologetic. "Already?" "But the reservation was for 8 o'clock, Chloe replied, confusion and a hint of suspicion beginning to swirl within her. Mason looked uncomfortable. "No, your reservation was actually for 6. At that moment, Chloe understood. This had been a setup. Taking a deep breath to maintain her composure, she followed Mason to the main dining room. There, she found the remnants of the meal scattered across the table, empty dishes and wine bottles left carelessly, as if in haste. Her mother, Samantha, sat wearing a Chanel tweed jacket and a superficial smile. Daniel appeared uneasy in his chair, and Melody, ever the provocateur, smirked as she tapped on her smartphone. "Oh, Chloe, you finally arrived," Samantha said, feigning surprise. "We've already finished eating." Chloe's heart sank a little at the scene, but also hardened with resolve. This night was not just about a missed dinner. It was a stark revelation of the lengths her family would go to marginalize her. Yet, here she was, ready to face whatever came next, standing firm in her values and the life she chose with Ethan. Chloe's tone was frosty as she addressed her mother. We didn't expect to be late. The invitation said 8 o'clock. That's impossible, Melody countered quickly, her voice sharp. It was at 7. I made sure of it. Chloe pulled out her smartphone and showed them a message from Samantha which clearly stated, please come. Ignoring the proof, Samantha quickly changed the subject. About the bill. We had to order because you were late, even though this was supposed to celebrate your baby shower. So, you expect me to pay? Chloe cut her off, her voice steady. Exactly. Melody chimed in. Since you were late. Chloe glanced at the bill on the table. 4-course dinners, 2 bottles of expensive wine, additional desserts. The total was over $5,000. As they debated, calm footsteps approached from the restaurant entrance. Sorry to keep you waiting, came Ethan's composed voice. Dressed in his navy suit, he walked toward the table with an authoritative air. Oh, Ethan. Samantha's tone suddenly turned sweet. Glad you could join us. Following Ethan was Chef Anthony, the restaurant's owner, whose appearance made Samantha's smile freeze. Mrs. Williams, Anthony began solemnly, thank you for visiting the flagship restaurant of the Smith Hospitality Group today. Smith Hospitality Group. Melody's voice wavered. Yes, Ethan replied smoothly. It's my company. I manage 5 upscale restaurants in Milwaukee, including Lissendor. The faces of Chloe's family members blanched as they realized that the man they had underestimated, the president of a small real estate firm, was actually the owner of a luxury restaurant group. Ethan continued, all records of today's reservation and surveillance footage are maintained as evidence of intentional time tampering and fraudulent billing. Samantha's hands trembled as she clutched her handbag. Daniel's face turned ashen, and Melody nearly dropped her phone. This is just a misunderstanding, Daniel began, his voice desperate. It's not a misunderstanding, Father, Ethan interjected calmly, yet his gaze was piercing. This is premeditated fraud. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We are also thoroughly investigating your past actions. Chloe stood beside Ethan, watching as the facade of her family's vanity and deceit began to crumble. Outside, the Milwaukee skyline shone brilliantly against the night sky, the scene inside the private dining room starkly different. The chandelier's harsh light seemed to spotlight the faces around the table. Ethan placed a black leather briefcase on the table, the snap of its lock echoing in the tense atmosphere. Samantha's makeup-caked face twisted in distress, while Daniel mopped sweat from his brow with his aged hands. The air was heavy with the gravity of the moment, as decades of pretense and manipulation were laid bare, setting the stage for a profound confrontation. As the confrontation unfolded, Melody, still clutching her phone, seemed paralyzed by the revelations. Ethan withdrew a document from the briefcase and presented it, his voice steady. This is Williams Real Estate's transaction record for the past 6 years. Daniel, visibly shaken, stammered, What are you talking about? False transactions, fake invoicing, Ethan continued, showing another document, and multiple illegal loans. Chloe gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief at the depth of corruption within her father's company. Since the 2010 real estate crisis, your company has effectively been bankrupt. Yet, you've continued to sustain a lavish lifestyle, all funded through illicit means. Be quiet, Samantha interjected sharply. What do you know? We have a social standing to protect. To maintain that, we had to. Are you saying that committing fraud was necessary? Chloe cut in, her voice tinged with disbelief and anger. Is that why you've always looked down on me? Melody, suddenly standing, sneered at Chloe. Living a modest life, you're a disgrace to our family. You don't understand anything. Chloe remained composed. Ethan, what about Melody? Ethan pulled out another document. Melody Williams, here are the findings from an investigation into your divorce and current financial situation. Melody's complexion paled. You've been divorced for 7 months. The title of sales director at your father's company was a lie, Chloe continued relentlessly. The actual sales are 0. You take a salary and leech off your parents. Stop. Melody broke down, tears streaming down her face. I was desperate after the divorce. I had nothing, and I didn't want anyone, especially not you, who seems to live a perfect life, to know. Perfect. Chloe scoffed. I've just been living honestly. Enough is enough. Samantha's voice rose again. We have been protecting the pride of our family. Chloe, you wouldn't understand. Pride? Ethan coldly retorted, pulling out another document. Take a look at this. He handed over a document showing Samantha's personal bank account transactions. Mrs. Williams, you have been using funds embezzled from your husband's company to fund lavish trips to high-end spas and beauty clinics. Be quiet. Samantha covered her ears with her hands. A newcomer like you has no right to criticize our way of life, she snapped at Ethan. A newcomer? Ethan replied calmly, yet firmly. I have built my business honestly, without any illicit means. And the reason you've looked down on me, Chloe stood up, joining Ethan, is just jealousy. Because I achieved success on my terms, without getting caught up in pretense and vanity like you did. Daniel's voice trembled as he finally spoke, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. The room was heavy with tension, the revelations casting a stark light on the crumbling facade of a family that had valued appearances over integrity. Chloe and Ethan stood united, prepared to face whatever came next, their resolve unshaken. Chloe's voice was resonant with resolve as she addressed her family. You claim it was all in my best interest, but you've lived only for your pride. You never truly cared about me or this child. She gently caressed her belly, a protective gesture. She was adamant that her unborn child would not be sullied by their world filled with deceit. What do you intend to do now? Ethan asked in a low, calm voice, indicating the pile of damning evidence on the table. Daniel's face drained of color. No, not that, he murmured. Melody, tears streaming down her face, pleaded. Please stop. We can't fall any further. Fall. Chloe's reply was icy. You've been falling for a long time. You just refuse to acknowledge it. The chandelier above harshly lit the documents below, each page a testament to years of lies and deception. Ethan's voice was firm. You have 38 hours to decide what you will do. If we don't hear from you by then, we will take legal action. Samantha, desperate, reached out to Chloe. Surely you wouldn't turn against your own family? We're no longer family, Chloe stated flatly. As of today, it's all over. Goodbye. With that, she and Ethan left the room, leaving behind the three Williams family members who sat stunned in silence, the remnants of their facade scattered around them. Outside, the Milwaukee skyline continued to shimmer beautifully, but its glow seemed unreachable, lost to those inside the restaurant. Days later, the solemn atmosphere of the courtroom contrasted sharply with the bright sunlight streaming through its windows. Chloe, now visibly 7 months pregnant, sat quietly next to Ethan in the spectator section. The room was charged with tension as the prosecutor began the trial for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement against Daniel Williams, Samantha Williams, and Melody Williams will now commence. The 38-hour grace period had elapsed without a word from the Williams family. In their desperation, they had attempted to destroy the evidence, only further incriminating themselves. Regarding the systemic fraudulent transactions at Williams Real Estate, the prosecutor continued, the defendants conducted fraudulent activities exceeding $12 million since 2010. Chloe observed the backs of her family members in the dock. The glamorous veneer they had maintained for so long was gone. Her father appeared weary, the weight of his actions etched into his tired frame. Her mother, usually so meticulously made up, now sat with her face bare and downturned, a stark symbol of their fall from grace. As the trial unfolded, the gravity of their choices and the impact of their deceit was laid bare, marking a definitive end to the charade they had lived for so long. Melody clutched a handkerchief in her trembling hands as one piece of damning evidence after another was presented in the courtroom. The records laid bare the fraudulent loans, doctored financial statements, and the orchestrated fraud at the restaurant, all meticulously documented and exposed. The prosecutor revealed that Samantha Williams had personally misappropriated over $3 million from company funds, causing a stir among the courtroom spectators. Samantha covered her face in shame. The charges against Melody were equally severe. She had reported fictitious sales figures, received unearned salaries, and fraudulently obtained economic benefits through false declarations during her divorce proceedings. Melody's shoulders trembled under the weight of her misdeeds. The defense's attempts to justify their actions sounded increasingly hollow. They claimed that the defendants had made unavoidable choices to maintain their social status. However, when the prosecutor objected, stating that maintaining social status does not justify committing crimes, the judge firmly sustained the objection. Ethan's testimony was pivotal. As a witness, he detailed the incident starting from the fraudulent setup at the restaurant and further unveiled the results of a long-term investigation. He described how Williams' real estate, though outwardly successful, was in reality completely insolvent. The defendants had engaged in a series of illicit activities to mask this truth. As Chloe listened to Ethan's testimony, she was resolute in her heart that this was not about revenge. It was about justice, necessary measures to end years of lies and deception. In the afternoon session, the verdicts were delivered. Daniel Williams was sentenced to 6 years in prison, Samantha Williams to 5 years, and Melody Williams to 4 years with 5 years suspended. Additionally, they were ordered to return the ill-gotten gains and pay substantial fines. Williams' real estate was to be liquidated, the family mansion seized, and all assets frozen. After the verdict, Samantha became distraught. "Chloe, are you going to send your own mother to prison?" she cried out in a mix of anger and desperation. Melody, still reeling from her sentence, shouted, "Are you satisfied with ruining our lives?" Ethan responded calmly, emphasizing the self-inflicted nature of their downfall. "It was your own actions that ruined your lives," he stated. As Chloe left the courtroom, her stride was steady, her resolve firm. She had sought justice, not vengeance, and in doing so, ensured that her future, and that of her child, would be free from the deceit and corruption that had marked her family's legacy. Chloe didn't glance back as she descended the courthouse steps, the spring sunlight enveloping her in warmth. Ethan, always attuned to her feelings, asked gently, "Are you okay?" "Yes. Now our child can grow up in a world free of lies and deceit." The bustling streets of Milwaukee carried on as usual around them, but for Chloe, everything felt profoundly altered. This was not just an end, it was the dawn of a new beginning. 2 years later, in the serene neighborhood of Cudahy, Chloe stood by the window, watching her 3-year-old daughter, Lucia, play among the swirling autumn leaves in the garden. The scene was reminiscent of that day 4 years ago, yet everything in her life had transformed. "Mommy, look," Lucia called out, holding up a drawing of flowers. "That's lovely." Chloe smiled warmly, her heart swelling with pride. Just then Ethan emerged from the study. "Chloe, about your mother. Samantha Williams has been released from Illinois State Prison," he informed her, referring to information from a mutual friend. The once poised and commanding figure of Samantha had aged significantly, now appearing as a tired, old woman. Her post-prison life seemed bleak, with most assets seized and slim prospects for reintegrating into society. "Does it bother you?" Ethan asked softly. "No, I just feel it's karma," Chloe responded, pulling out a letter from a drawer. It was from Melody, who, after receiving a suspended sentence, now lived modestly in a small town. The letter contained an apology and a plea for reconciliation, but Chloe had no intention of responding. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, his presence reassuring. "What are you thinking about?" "That we made the right choice. We cut off relationships built on falsehoods and chose true happiness," Chloe replied. Over the past 2 years, the Smith Hospitality Group had flourished, yet they continued to embrace a simple lifestyle. Luxury and pretense were unnecessary. True happiness lay much deeper. "Any regrets?" Ethan whispered from behind her. "Not one. We chose to live honestly, and that's what led to our current happiness," Chloe mused, recalling a story a friend had shared about Daniel Williams, once dubbed the real estate king of Milwaukee. In prison, without the deference he was accustomed to, Daniel's sanity gradually unraveled. Nightly, he muttered, "I am a big shot. Don't you know who I am?" becoming a source of mockery among the other inmates. The family that had lived a lie had paid a heavy price, but Chloe had chosen a different path, one of honesty and integrity. This choice had not only reshaped her life, but had built a foundation of true contentment and hope for the future. As she gazed out at her daughter playing in the garden, Chloe felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace, secure in the knowledge that she had steered her family toward a brighter, more authentic life.